Chapter 3150. Maintain the status quo. Manit and Aluntarai said almost at the same time. They were rookies now, but they were having a good time. They had enough resources and almost no bottlenecks. When they encountered bottlenecks, they would use resources. If one wasn't enough, they would use two. If two wasn't enough, they would use four. They could always break through the bottlenecks. The supernatural organization didn't care who used up how many resources. Every member could receive enough attention. Everyone could be trained as an elite. Plus, the two of them were highly regarded by the team and Chen Zhao. But what if there were too many people? What if there was a new person who had the same role as them? Could they still get so many resources? Could they still receive so much attention? That was obviously impossible. So they didn't want the current environment of the supernatural organization to change. Also, they had to consider the big picture. The biggest question was whether Chen Zhao could continue to be the president of the supernatural organization. They understood the history of the supernatural organization, the past supernatural organization, and the current supernatural organization were two extremes. They were as weak as they were in the past. All the changes were because of Chen Zhao. It could be said that without Chen Zhao, the supernatural organization would still be the same. In fact, would the members of the supernatural organization still stay? They were united because of Chen Zhao. If Chen Zhao left, would they stay? Every one of them would be a top expert in North America. But without Chen Zhao, would anyone still be able to command them? Would anyone still be able to restrain them? The two of them understood it the best. So they didn't want anything to change. Chen Zhao didn't have any nostalgia for his position as the president. But after spending so much time with the members, he had feelings for them. Chen Zhao couldn't bear to leave them. The supernatural organization itself didn't have any binding power. The unity of the organization existed because of Chen Zhao. He listened to Aluntarai and Manit's explanation and analysis. Chen Zhao nodded slightly. Then let's keep a low profile. The plane landed on the runway of the supernatural organization's airport. Many members came to welcome Chen Zhao's group. Many people pulled Helith and Ungalit over too, wanting to know what happened on the 100 Vault Islands. After all, what happened on the islands wasn't a secret anymore. At least, most people felt that it was what they thought it was. Of course, he didn't tell them. Chen Zhao walked with West. Chen Zhao told West his thoughts and decision. Of course, the main ones were Aluntarai and Manet's. West was worried about this as well. He didn't want the supernatural organization to return to its previous half-dead state. If Chen Zhao left one day, and his successor wasn't accepted by the other members, Chen Zhao wouldn't be able to accept it. Then the supernatural society would fall apart in a day. Here, Chen Zhao represented absolute authority and dominance. Recently, I heard that some entertainment companies are in contact with spiritualists and are planning to promote spiritualist celebrities. Should we intervene and regulate them? What's there to care about? Just let nature take its course. Anyway, as long as the law allows it, we won't interfere. The law doesn't restrict spiritualists from becoming celebrities. In fact, Chen Zhao had underestimated the changes brought about by the exposure of the spiritual world. On the way back, Chen Zhao realized that all the radio stations were broadcasting news about the spiritual world. For example, a haunted house was discovered somewhere. In the past, they would only treat it as some kind of prank or urban legend. But now, ordinary people already knew about the existence of the spiritual world. So it wasn't just speculation anymore. The radio station even invited a real spiritualist. They analyzed the haunted house and what kind of evil spirits existed there. They even planned to get rid of them. If the spiritualists found the haunted house, how would they get rid of the spirits? If an ordinary person accidentally entered the house, how would they protect themselves? Chen Zhao only smiled at this. The spiritualist that the radio station invited should have some real skills. His analysis was quite on point. Even if Chen Zhao went on the radio, he wouldn't be able to do it better. After being away for almost a month, Chen Zhao finally returned home. After a month, little Jerlin and little Larissa seemed to have grown a bit. Of course, children of their age grew up quickly to begin with. Maybe after a few days, they would realize that they'd grown a bit. In the evening, Feilai asked about what had happened in the 100 Ku Islands. Chen Zhao selectively told her some things. Are there really magical beasts from another world invading? There are, but the threat of otherworld magical beasts isn't that great. Then why do I see on the news that without the 100 Ku Islands, the world will be destroyed and humans will go extinct? So that ordinary people and spiritualists won't fight each other, Chen Zhao said. Humans are like this. They will only choose peace when there are external enemies. Just then, Didi ran in and sat on the sofa beside Chen Zhao. Uncle, I want to discuss something with you. What? I want to transfer schools. Transfer schools? Why? Chen Zhao looked at Didi in confusion. Are you not satisfied with the school you're in? Didi was the oldest and also the highest. He wasn't in Mountain Town's middle school. Instead, he was studying in a private school. No, it's not that I'm not satisfied. Didi glanced at Fei Lai. Chen Zhao looked at Fei Lai. You know the reason? I heard that a magic high school appeared in San Francisco. She wants to study there, Fei Lai said. Didi told me about this before. He wanted to ask for my opinion. But I don't know any information about that magic college, so I said it's up to you when you come back. Didi immediately looked at Chen Zhao with pitiful eyes. I need to know about that school. Chen Zhao wasn't surprised by the appearance of a magic high school. He just didn't expect it to appear so quickly. Or perhaps the magic high school had existed in the first place. He just didn't know. Regardless, Chen Zhao had to understand the school first. Then he could decide whether to send Didi to that school or not. Ever since the spiritual world had been completely exposed, all sorts of monsters had appeared. For a moment, Chen Zhao didn't know what was going on with the magic high school. Uncle, I want to go see the school myself. You can't, Fei Lai said. Have your uncle go with you. Didi looked at Chen Zhao. Chen Zhao glanced at Didi and then nodded. Yes, you know how complicated the spiritual world is. I'm worried about you going to San Francisco alone. I've seen you fight with a god. That doesn't count. Chapter 3151. Although Didira had some experience on the way to find the golden apple, but she'd been under someone else's protection at that time. Plus, her age was obvious. No matter what, Chen Zhao couldn't let Didira go somewhere else without worry. Didira really wanted to fly alone, but she couldn't convince Chen Zhao. Plus, she didn't plan on being too rebellious. After all, if Chen Zhao decided on something, he wouldn't care if he was rebellious or not. At night, Chen Zhao rose to an altitude of 300 kilometers. Normal navigation satellites and spy satellites were at this altitude. He couldn't even feel the air here. At the same time, the extreme coldness and cosmic rays were eroding his body. While cultivating, Chen Zhao looked at the world. At this altitude, he could see the outline of the entire world. Chen Zhao looked back into the distance. The moon here was even more majestic and full than on Earth. Sometimes, Chen Zhao would even rush to the moon directly. He would be the first person to land on the moon physically. But even Chen Zhao wasn't confident. After all, it was 380,000 kilometers away. It was 5 times the circumference of Earth. Chen Zhao's maximum speed was Mach 300. What did that mean? The fastest flying machine right now was Mach 20. To put it in simpler terms, it was 100 kilometers per second. It would only take about an hour to fly from Earth to the moon. The round trip would take 2 hours. If it was on the surface, Chen Zhao could fly for 10 days and 10 nights at full speed. But in space it was extremely cold. There was no spiritual energy either. It was also filled with cosmic rays. Chen Zhao wasn't sure how long he could last in such an environment. After all, even now, Chen Zhao didn't dare to go too high above the surface. 300,000 meters was Chen Zhao's current record. The higher he went, the stronger his sense of danger was. Clearly, Chen Zhao couldn't really survive in outer space. At least he couldn't do it for now. Of course, Chen Zhao wasn't in a hurry to land on the moon physically right now. At least he didn't have any competitors now. After cultivating, Chen Zhao returned home and had a good sleep. When he woke up in the morning, Fei Lai and the kids were already out. Only the lesser demons were busy with their work. Frigga had arrived early and was currently teaching little Jerlin and Larissa magic lessons. Portia and Zephyra arrived even after Chen Zhao had woken up. Needless to say, Portia must be stalling for time. There was a mistake, and it had to be Portia's. There was nothing wrong with following this train of thought. Boss, why is there no breakfast? Chen Zhao rolled his eyes. You're late, and you still want to get breakfast? Aren't you a little too arrogant? Portia wasn't aware of her mistake at all. Boss, I think we need to discuss our salary with you again. Portia suddenly looked at Chen Zhao seriously. Chen Zhao ignored Portia. He sat on the sofa and held the TV remote. Boss. Go ahead, Chen Zhao said casually. What don't you understand about your salary? Just say it. Boss, we're all powerful spiritualists, and we're proficient in all kinds of businesses. That's why we're asking for a raise. Just then the television broadcasted a piece of news. A magic street had appeared in Los Angeles. There were all kinds of magic shops and stalls on the magic street. There were even spiritualists holding signs that offered blessings, prophecies, exorcisms, and dispels disasters for the same price. $500 each. Chen Zhao glanced at Portia. It's impossible to get a raise. If you're not satisfied with your current salary, I suggest you go to this magic street. If you're early, you should be able to get an empty space. Portia organized her thoughts and said, Boss, my business skills. Business skills? How can you handle my finances as well as Navika? Or are you saying that your combat power is stronger than Fora? I'm very good at housework. Housekeeping doesn't even make $30 per hour. If you're only good at housework, I'm afraid I'll give you a pay cut. Or do you think you don't have to pay me back the $2 million? Chen Zhao narrowed his eyes at Portia. Portia gave up on her plan in despair. I'm going to work. Zephyra watched as Portia came back with a disappointed expression. What did you fail? That damn vampire capitalist. You should have known this would happen. I just wanted to try my luck. Every time you ask for a raise, the boss will remind you of the $2 million you owe him. So, before you pay it back, you'll never be able to raise your head before him. But if I don't get a raise, I won't be able to pay it back. Then I can't help you even if I want to. At this moment, Navika Lena rushed in. Portia had always been at odds with Navika. More accurately, she was one-sidedly jealous of Navika. Portia felt that she had graduated from a famous university after all. But why did she end up as a high-level housekeeper after so many years? Look at Navika Lena. How did she become Chen Zhao's legal consultant and financial manager right after graduating? Navika was a trainee lawyer, but she could feel Portia's hostility. When she saw Portia, she only nodded slightly. Then, he raised his chin arrogantly and stepped on the heaven-hating high steps to enter. Boss, Chen Zhao nodded. Have a seat. Are you here to tell me how much money you saved for me? It's Caribbean Empire Cruise Line. This year's dividend has arrived. You need to sign for confirmation. Oh really? Chen Zhao took out his phone and called Andrews from Citibank. After asking, he confirmed that the money had arrived. Then, he signed the document Navika gave him. Oh Mr. Chen, a few people came looking for you yesterday. If they're looking for me to invest, I'm not interested. They're not looking for you to invest. They said they're your employees and want their salary. Are you sure they're not scammers? Chen Zhao didn't think that he would owe them his salary. I'm not sure. But they gave me your personal number and said that they couldn't get through to you these days. So they came looking for me. Did they leave any contact information? Yes. Navika nodded. Oh, the leader should be a woman. I think she's called Nanier. Nanier. It's them. They're not scammers, right? Navika was curious too. It seemed that Chen Zhao really knew them. But in her impression, Chen Zhao wasn't the kind of person who would owe his salary. No, I'll contact them myself. Chapter 3152. Boss, we're out of money. Perwell looked at Nanier helplessly. Out of money? Nania asked in disbelief. We brought money to Los Angeles this time. How come we're out of money? Nania asked in disbelief. Perwell saw that Nanier was covered in brand tags that hadn't been removed yet. Nanier was clearly a god of the otherworldlings, but she was full of desire for human luxuries. She was more human than humans. She pursued the best in terms of food, clothing, and shelter. How about we do it? Perwell asked in a low voice. No. I'd rather beg than do it in boss's territory. You want to die, but I don't. Nanier shook her head hurriedly. Perwill and the others were speechless. Nania was the worst, even among her kind. Nanier killed people just like that. But once they returned to Los Angeles, Nanier suddenly changed. Fuck, she even had to wait for traffic lights. Perwill and the others couldn't bear it. Although Nanier had changed. But her personality hadn't changed. She didn't dare to kill people and rob them. But if Perwill and the others didn't listen to her, she still had to teach them a lesson. She didn't show any mercy at all. She would give them a mental shock and blow up their heads. Nania didn't dare to commit crimes in Los Angeles. But that didn't mean she didn't dare to deal with Perwill and the others. They'd already gotten used to Nanier's personality during the past 6 months on the island. Suddenly Nanier's phone rang. Hello. It's me. Where are you? A boss. Nanier jumped up in excitement. Chun Zhao looked at the people wolfing down the food. How long has it been since you last ate? Chun Zhao was speechless. You've almost eaten my ingredients worth $10,000. Although this was his buffet restaurant, the food here was bought with real money. 3 days. You didn't bring any money when you came to Los Angeles. Yes, Perwill said helplessly. We bought brand tags for boss. Shut up, Nanier scolded. Do you want to die? Asshole. Perwill shut his mouth helplessly. Chun Zhao was also speechless at Nanier's unconventional god. In any case, you're a god of unusual creatures. You've thrown your expertise in bewitching people to the Mariana Trench. He only knew how to shop and squander. He was even more human than a human. How's the ranch on Demon Island? Boss, there are 1,000 newborns and 300 semi-mature ones. We can produce 2 mature ones every day. Nanier was not ashamed of raising and selling her own kind. In fact, the morality of the otherworldly gods was completely different from that of humans. Although they had the concept of being the same kind, they did not have the awareness of being compatriots. Even without Nanier, they would only kill and devour each other. You mentioned before, how's the progress of the higher grade edible type? Out of 1,000 larvae, about 200 of them can only be cultivated into high-grade edible ones. They haven't matured yet, and the larvae that were born before I took over have already lost their first mutation. Although we can continue to cultivate them using the same method, we won't be able to cultivate them into higher-grade ones. However, their meat quality and effects are still better than the previous unusual god. Not bad, you've all done well. Chun Zhao took out a check. Other than the first few days, I'll give you another 10 days off. You can do whatever you want during these 10 days. You know the rules. After 10 days, go back to work. Seeing the number on the check, Nanier's eyes lit up. She was already calculating how many clothes and handbags she could buy with this much money. Seeing Nanier's expression, Perwill knew that things were bad. He looked at Chun Zhao pitifully. Chun Zhao rolled his eyes. Then, he took out his phone and called Andrews. Andrews, I'll have a few people go to the bank later. Help me give them tens of thousands of dollars. Mr. Chun, how much? Whatever. Just $100,000 per person, Chun Zhao said casually. After hanging up, he said to Perwill and the others, go to Citibank and find someone called Andrews to get the money. Tell him that I told you to go. I don't have any cash or checks on me. I'll go play for a few days and come back on time. Then I'll go too, Nanier said greedily. Chun Zhao rolled his eyes at Nanier. She'd already taken the check. Now, she wouldn't even let go of the $100,000. Chun Zhao threw down 2 sports car keys. I'll lend you 2 sports cars outside. Don't break them. Chun Zhao was about to stand up and leave when Perwill suddenly called out. Boss, wait. I have something to tell you. Chun Zhao stopped and looked at Perwill. Was he going to tell on Nania? To Chun Zhao, as long as Nanier didn't betray him and completed her mission, he wouldn't care. He wouldn't care what she did on Demon Island. What? Boss, I have a brother. Perwill looked at Chun Zhao troubled. I'm not interested in your brother. I won't care about him. No, I want to bring my brother when we go back to Demon Island. What? Chun Zhao thought that he'd heard wrong or misunderstood. Say that again. When we go back to Demon Island, I want to bring my brother. You know what Demon Island is, right? I know, of course I know. Perwill had been living on Demon Island for half a year. How could he not know what Demon Island was? He's like me in the past, Perwill said. I'm afraid that he'll die on the streets at any time, so I want to bring him to Demon Island. He's a wanted criminal, right? No. He's been to the police station a few times, but he's definitely not a wanted criminal. Fine. Since he's not a wanted criminal, then bring him. As for the method, it's up to you, Chen Zhao said casually. But you know the rules. As long as he goes to Demon Island, he has to follow my rules. Chen Zhao said casually. Yes, I understand. Street thugs all over the world were the same. They were lazy and hovered at the edge of morality, constantly testing it. No one knew when they'd commit a heartless crime. Perwil was also worried about his brother. To him, even being Chen Zhao's shepherd was better than dying on the streets. At least, he'd enjoyed good treatment after becoming Chen Zhao's employee. He also had Chen Zhao's protection. It was definitely 100 times better than living on the streets. Of course, the only downside was that Demon Island was very far. They had to spend most of their time on Demon Island. But it was still a proper job, and it was a high-paying one. Chapter 3153. After collecting the money, Powell and the others ran to the Las Vegas casino. As for Nanier, she had no interest in gambling. She was only interested in squandering. After giving Nanier a check, Chen Zhao left her alone. Although the otherworldly god had no morals to speak of. However, they had their own way of doing things. If he was crazy, then he would be boundlessly crazy. If he was a coward, then he would be a complete coward. Chen Zhao didn't have time to care about Nanier. It was mainly because there had been a lot of things happening in the past few days. The complete exposure of the spirit world, and the arrival of the spirit chi tide. It had already caused some obvious changes to the situation of the entire world. Anyway, there were a lot of things to worry about. For example, someone's kid was playing a prank with magic. Another example was the haunted house that had been abandoned for more than 10 years. In the past, there was no evidence for such things. But now it was basically conclusive evidence. Los Angeles wasn't too bad. With the supernatural organization around, those small fries wouldn't be able to cause any trouble. There was also the psionic team, although they were enemies with the supernatural organization. However, the psionic team was quite capable in maintaining public order. Chen, do you have time? How about a cup of coffee? Amira said. Chen Zhao picked up the phone. You're a strong woman. Do you have time to get coffee? Building relationships with important clients is also one of the jobs of a strong woman. All right. Amira arranged to meet Chen Zhao at her own private club, a golf club by the sea. Chen Zhao also saw 2 association members here. Last time, Amira had asked Chen Zhao for some special bodyguards. Chen Zhao had Amira contact West, and then found the 2 bodyguards. They were part of Norma's team. When they saw Chen Zhao, they were surprised. Guild leader. I have an appointment with Amira. Where is she now? Let us take you there. From afar, they could see a table on the shoreline. Amelia sat there, drinking coffee and enjoying the sea breeze. Chen Zhao walked over. Amira turned her head slightly, and watched Chen Zhao stroll over. Chen, sit. Chen Zhao pulled out a chair and sat down. A waiter brought him a cup of coffee. Chen Zhao really didn't like drinking coffee outdoors, especially when he had to put on airs. It's rare to see you so relaxed. Amira took a sip of coffee. I know you don't like to talk in the office. All right, looks like we have business to discuss. Do you really think I have so much time to ask you out for coffee at 3 in the afternoon? Who knows? Don't you rich people like to do things that ordinary people can't understand? Don't forget you're richer than me. You didn't call me over to discuss our assets, did you? A few days ago, when I was investigating the flow of funds in the bank, I found a very special collateral. What kind of collateral can make you so curious? Vico Archipelago, the legendary frontline of a different world's invasion war. Amira looked at Chen Zhao. I wanted to make a contribution to the world and get the loan waived, but then I realized that someone paid it back. Amira stared at Chen Zhao. Chen Zhao shrugged. I'm an old friend of the Egler family. Is it that surprising that I'm paying a friend back? I thought it was because of the benefits. Amira still looked at Chen Zhao with a meaningful look. Amira, regardless of whether the Baiko Archipelago has benefits or not, you shouldn't think about the Baiko Archipelago, Chen Zhao said calmly. It was just as Amira had guessed. The Baiko archipelago did indeed have great benefits. As for Monica and Tess Agler, they were still too young. They thought that the Baiko archipelago was only worth what they could see. That was why they sold 50% of the Baiko archipelago to Chen Zhao, under Chen Zhao's persuasion. But no matter how Chen Zhao had gotten the 50% ownership, it still belonged to him. Amira wasn't from the spiritual world. Chen Zhao didn't think that Amira should come into contact with the Baiko archipelago. What if I want it? You can't. Even if you buy the ownership of the Baiko archipelago from someone else, you won't be able to keep it. Chen, you seem to have underestimated me. Even the American government doesn't own the Baiko archipelago. If you buy the ownership, you'll just be contributing to the country. You should know the darkness of politics better than me. I can let someone else buy it. I still have some family members with other nationalities. Such underhanded methods are meaningless in front of politicians. As long as Citibank is an American company, it can't be separated from politics. Then why can you own it? Because I'm the guardian, Chen Zhao said matter-of-factly. If the American government tries to take something from me, I'll fight back with the fiercest method. Chen Zhao said matter-of-factly. Can you fight against the government? Maybe, maybe not. But no matter if I win or lose, the government will definitely lose. Chen Zhao picked up his cup and drank some coffee. I've never liked coffee. Chen Zhao looked at Amira seriously. Don't rush into something you don't understand. If you lose in politics, you'll at most lose some benefits. But in the spiritual world, you'll lose more than just benefits. Is that a threat? Chen Zhao stood up and tidied his clothes. It's a warning, not just for you, but also for the person behind you. If you ask me out again, you'd better do it in a restaurant or a bar. Coffee tastes really bad. Chen, your company is also in this country. Did you forget? Chen Zhao stopped and turned back to look at Amira. You and the person behind you clearly don't know me well, Chen Zhao said. Otherwise, you wouldn't say something like that. You can tell him that starting a war against me is the same as starting a war against the entire spiritual world. Now, Chen Zhao had the right to say that. This world is dominated by ordinary people after all. Ha! Tell that person that if I feel like I'm being targeted, I'll strangle his family one by one in front of him. His wife, his children, all his family members. I'll let him understand that he's facing a demon. Amira didn't say anything else. Only after Chen Zhao left did Amira pick up her phone. Mr. Schwick, communication failed. Also, the threat you prepared didn't have any effect. Instead, it angered him. Looks like I have to let him understand the power of politics. Mr. Schwick, I have to remind you that he's very powerful. From what I know, he's at the top of the spiritual world. So what? Since he's on this land, he can only play by my rules. Fine. I hope you understand what you're doing. Chapter 3154. Mr. Chen, the beer factory stopped production. Stopped production? Why? Today, officials from the city hall came to the beer factory. They said that our beer factory didn't meet safety standards and failed quality inspection. City hall officials? Since when did the city hall take care of production safety and quality inspection? Mr. Chen, did you offend someone? Denver asked. Denver obviously knew that the city hall didn't have the power to interfere with production. However, the city hall called the fire department and the food safety supervision committee directly. Chen Zhao frowned. Okay, I understand. Follow the official's request and resume production as soon as possible. After hanging up, Alex called again. Chen, the Marine Animal Protection Organization, suddenly landed on Mysterious Island in the past 2 days. They said that the project destroyed the marine ecology and had a conflict with the construction team on the island. Now, the Coast Guard is involved in the investigation and ordered the project to stop temporarily. I understand. Have the construction team stop for a week. Chen, do you know how much we'll lose if we stop for a week? I know, Chen Zhao said. I just don't want the conflict to escalate. Chen, did something happen? Nothing, Chen Zhao said calmly. Someone just went out without a brain. Maybe I can find some connections and solve the problem, Alex said. No need. Chen Zhao immediately rejected Alex's suggestion and hung up the phone. It was the first time Alex had been so rudely hung up. She could vaguely sense the anger hidden under Chen Zhao's calm tone. Chen Zhao dialed another number. Hello, Mr. Governor. Who is it? I'm Chen Zhao, Chinese. I thought you knew me. I won't hold a Huaxia man in my heart. Governor, I think you've crossed the line. Crossed the line? I don't think so. I'm just using my power reasonably. Didn't Miss Amira pass on my message? Don't try to barge into areas you don't understand. Ha! Chinese Chen, are you threatening me? Your weapon is politics, but you clearly know nothing about me. I really want to see what you can do to me. Kill me? Killing you is easy, but I don't want to do that. I'll let you know me first. Haha, I have no interest in you. Whether you're interested or not, you need to understand. Let me kindly remind you that there will be a huge storm on the West Coast tonight. I don't need you to remind me. The West Coast Weather Bureau has the best meteorologists and equipment in the world. After hanging up the phone, Schwick immediately dialed his assistant's number. Contact the West Coast Weather Bureau immediately and ask about the weather conditions in California and the West Coast for the next 3 days. Schwick soon received a reply from his assistant. Sir, the Weather Bureau said that the West Coast cities will have clear skies for the next few days, and the daytime temperature will be around 28 degrees Celsius. If you want to go out and play, it will be a good choice. All right, I got it. Schwick smiled. It seemed like the other party was just trying to scare him. Schwick picked up the phone again and dialed another number. Hey, Mr. Donzer. That man called me angrily today and threatened to create a storm. Don't worry, Mr. Schwick. No one in this world can create a storm unless that person is God. Are you sure? I'm very sure. Donzer was one of the members of the think tank that Schwick had recently recruited. He was also his partner. He filled in the gap in Schwick's team regarding the spiritual world. Donzer had a very deep background in the spiritual world. Schwick's main demand was political, and Donzer was an important part of his control over the North American spiritual world. And Donzer's demand was in the spiritual world. Both sides needed each other, and there was no conflict of interest. Therefore, it was quite a pleasant cooperation. After ending the call with Schwick, Donzer put away the phone in satisfaction. He would use Schwick's political power to control the supernatural organization and the entire North American spiritual world. Then, he would use the North American spiritual world to support Schwick, so that he could successfully break through in next year's election and become the Great Chancellor. Then, he would use the Great Chancellor's political power to complete control over the entire American spiritual world. As for that Chinese man, he was the current president of the supernatural organization. In Donzer's eyes, he was just an insignificant person. He might have some power, but he had no political background. To Donzer, he was a political noob. Without relying on any political power, he controlled a supernatural organization that was funded by the government. Donzer walked into a bar. It was opened by an old friend of his. Hi, Kindle. Kindle was wiping a glass at the bar and glanced at Donzer. What do you want? Whiskey. With a smile, Donzer said. Kindle, how did the World Supernatural Competition go? Not very good. Kindle answered unhappily. Bad ranking. Kindle was even more unhappy. It wasn't just bad ranking. I almost didn't come back. $15, thanks. Kindle ignored Donzer. How about my suggestion last time? I remember I've already refused you. Kindle, come and help me. I really need you. Donzer looked at Kindle sincerely. I just want to run this bar well now. Do you have any business here? That's none of your business. As long as you're willing to help me, I'll open a bar 10 times more luxurious for you in a month. You have money. Kindle knew that Donzer was as poor as he was. No, even poorer than him. I'll have it in a month. I'm not interested in empty promises. You don't trust me. I only believe in the benefits in front of me. If you can give me $100,000 now, I'll work for you. If not, please pay for the drinks first. A month. I only need a month. By then, I'll be in charge of the entire LA. Ha! Impossible. You don't call the shots here. The supernatural organization calls the shots here. In a month, the supernatural organization will belong to me, Donzer said confidently. Kendall stopped wiping the glass and looked at Donzer in confusion. Donzer, do you know what you're saying? Of course I know. I'll get rid of that yellow monkey soon. Kendall sighed. He was actually tempted, but after hearing Donzer's words, he completely gave up on the idea that had just sprouted. Was this guy an idiot? Didn't he know that he was walking on the edge of death? Chapter 3155. Leave the money and you can scram. Tangsei was stunned. Why did Kendall turn against him so suddenly? In the past, Kendall didn't like him, but at least he wouldn't talk to him like this. Kendall, did I say anything wrong? You made a mistake from the moment you entered my bar. I don't want to have anything to do with you. What do you mean? You don't even know who you're facing. You think you can control the supernatural organization? Of course I know who I'm facing. Do you think I'm fighting alone? No, you don't understand. You don't understand at all. Kendall looked at Tangsei calmly. I'll give you a piece of advice. Stop your stupid plan immediately. I don't know what you're planning, but I'm sure you'll regret it. Huh? You're the stupid one. Tangsei sneered. The plan has already started. That person has been forced into a corner. Soon he'll compromise. Kendall rolled his eyes as an idea formed in his mind. You only know how to talk big. I've known you for so many years. Every time you tell me you have a plan, you've never succeeded. It's different this time, Tangsei said proudly. Tangsei said proudly. My ally this time is Governor Swick. Do you know what this means? We can't lose. The governor? How can he support you? Get the police to arrest the president of the supernatural organization? That's too violent. It's easy to deal with that Huaxia man. As long as we use the various departments of the government to suppress his personal business, he will yield. It's a simple but effective method. That Huaxia man even threatened Mr. Swick, saying that he would create a storm. Haha, it's so interesting to see him struggle helplessly. Kendall shuddered. Fine, this drink is on me. You can leave now and don't come to me again. Tangsei didn't understand why Kendall's attitude changed so much this time. He was trying to drive her away. Kendall, after I control Los Angeles, you'll see. Throwing these harsh words, Tangsei left resentfully. His good mood had been ruined by Kinhair's unwillingness to cooperate. As soon as he left the bar, Tangsei realized that the sky was filled with dark clouds. Why did the weather suddenly change? Tangsei's mood worsened. In the car, there was a weather report on the radio. A supercyclone was forming 2,000 kilometers away from the west coast, and it would land on the west coast at around 20 o'clock. According to calculations, this supercyclone was likely to evolve into a superstorm. A red alert has been issued for the west coast. There were 4 types of storm warnings: blue, yellow, orange and red. International early warning recognition. Blue is the lowest and red is the highest. Each level was 10 times more dangerous than the next. A red alert meant that it would be a disaster. It was a cyclone that had just formed, not even a storm yet. It had actually issued a red alert. This meant that the wind speed of this cyclone had reached an extremely terrifying level. Once a real storm vortex was formed, it would be unprecedented. There was a superstorm that hit the west coast last April. It was also a red alert at the time, and half of Los Angeles was flooded. Moreover, it also triggered a tsunami, and seawater flowed inland, causing huge economic losses and casualties. Tangsei drove, but his expression grew more and more serious. Storm? This storm came too suddenly. Tangsei felt a little uneasy. Just then a call came in. Hello, Mr. Swick. What's with this storm? Give me an explanation. What's with this storm? It's a coincidence, Mr. Swick. Please believe me. Spiritualists have powers that ordinary people can't understand, but this power is very limited. It's impossible for them to create a storm. Is there really no one who can do it? Of course. I can guarantee that no one can do it. Hearing Tangsei's reassurance, Swick relaxed a little. Just as he was thinking about how to deal with this storm, the phone rang again. The phone rang again, and Swick picked it up. How is it? My weather forecast is accurate, right? China Chen, you don't think that a coincidental storm can make me yield, do you? Of course not. I'm not going to let you go so easily. Just like you said, you attacked me with the method you're good at, so I'll fight back with the method I'm good at. This is just the beginning. Oh, by the way, you'd better be careful to protect the road you're planning to build, because it will be destroyed by this storm. Then the insider deals you made with the construction company will be exposed. You don't think that you can scare me like this. Actually, Swick was already scared. He suddenly regretted his decision a little. Oh right, there's something else I need to remind you. I'll also arrange a special program. Magical beasts from the other world will come into contact with you. Then your contact will be exposed by the media. You'll be a traitor who betrayed humanity for your own benefit. Your wife will leave you. And your son will also be exposed because of this. He'll be bullied in school. Don't mess around. This has nothing to do with my family. Hee. It's up to me to decide whether or not it's unrelated. Mr. Swick, you know that we Chinese have a habit of killing all our enemies in the cradle. Although your son is still underage, I'll use the most vicious method to bury him with you. Mr. Chen, we can talk. No need. From the moment you attacked me, we're enemies. I never negotiate with enemies, nor will I compromise. Chen Zhao's tone was joyful. Guess who is the envoy of chaos from the other world beside you? Swick's heart sank even more. He wasn't sure if Chen Zhao was telling the truth, but he didn't dare to take the risk, not with his family. He completely regretted it now. It was just as Chen Zhao had said before. He'd barged into the unknown otherworld. And he'd offended such a dangerous enemy. They were all professionals in their respective fields. Do you know what the saddest thing in life is? After you go to prison, your wife will remarry, and your son's stepfather will drive your car, sleep with your woman and beat your child. It's so pleasant to be your enemy. All right. Don't worry. You won't be sentenced to death. I'll do everything I can to avoid the death penalty. I need you to live to witness it all. Chen Zhao teased. You're right. Chapter 3156. That night, a superstorm landed on the west coast. This superstorm, codenamed Demon, lived up to its name. Demon. It had set a record. The highest wind speed was 600 kilometers per hour. What did that mean? According to the scientists' calculations, ocean currents, and the Earth's rotation speed, the highest speed of a hurricane wouldn't exceed 360 kilometers per hour. But this calculation wasn't absolute. As the global climate warmed, more and more mega and superstorms began to approach this limit, and some even surpassed it. Demon. But it appeared before the world in a terrifying manner, destroying the world. After the demon storm landed, it was really like the end of the world. First, a wave over 40 meters hit the coast. In recent years, the highest recorded wave was only 21 meters. But the height of the waves caused by this storm had reached a terrifying level. No ship on the sea could withstand such a terrifying wave. Countless ships docked at the docks were affected first. It was also destructive. The stronger the storm, the heavier Swick's mood became. Mr. Donzer, I want to know. You said that humans can't create storms. How did this storm come about? Prophecy. It must be prophecy magic. Donzer was also very anxious. The rundown house he lived in was leaking. It was on the verge of collapsing under the storm. All of Los Angeles had lost power. It couldn't be helped. The storm had destroyed many electric cables. The entire city was shrouded in the demon's shadow. The demons were tearing everything apart. Even the steel forest seemed so fragile before the demon storm. The tall buildings swayed in the storm. In fact, even Chen Zhao didn't expect this. The storm he'd created was so terrifying, because he didn't know how strong the storm he'd created was. Chen Zhao only released a large amount of heat above the Pacific Ocean. Based on the principle of a hurricane, the cold and hot air would collide and create a cyclone. Then, Chen Zhao sped up physically. If he turned left, he would go east and land in Asia. If he turned right, he would go west and land on the west coast. Chen Zhao even sped up manually. Then it created the current state of the demon storm. When Chen Zhao returned home with a satisfied expression, the Weather Bureau sent out a red alert. At the same time, the news kept reporting that this storm was unprecedented. Chen Zhao finally realized that he'd gone overboard. But he didn't plan on stopping them. Chen Zhao had even destroyed a section of the road. The construction contractor for this section of the road had some dealings with Swick. He didn't have enough evidence, but he didn't need it. They just needed to spend money and use the media to create public opinion. He didn't have much else, but he had a lot of money. Chen Zhao wanted to destroy everything Shwick had. This was the first politician to provoke Chen Zhao. Chen Zhao needed to display enough power and tactics. Otherwise, more people would come to offend him in the future. To put it bluntly, it was killing the chicken to warn the monkey. The entire city was in blackout, but Chen Zhao's house was still brightly lit. After his family went to bed, he left the manor again. Nanier, where are you now? Boss, I'm at the hotel. It's so annoying. I can't go anywhere tonight. The power is out in the hotel. Hate you? I'm the one who created this storm. Are you complaining to me? That's not what I meant. Nanier had no idea that this storm was caused by Chen Zhao. Go to the rooftop of the hotel now. I need you to do something. Nanier went to the rooftop obediently in the wind and rain. Soon Chen Zhao arrived. He picked up Nanier and left. Nanier didn't dare to ask. Soon, Chen Zhao told her what she needed to do. Soon, Chen Zhao brought Nanier to the sky above a villa. Shwick was in this villa. Apart from Shwick, there were 2 bodyguards in the villa. Moreover, these 2 bodyguards were spiritualists. Shwick was restless the entire night. He had a feeling that something was going to happen. But there was nothing he could do now. He couldn't do anything. He couldn't even leave the villa. The wind slammed against the glass windows. The sound was so terrifying that it made one's scalp go numb. Suddenly, the window seemed to be smashed by something. In an instant, the wind filled the room. Once an opening appeared, the air pressure in the entire villa lost balance. All the windows shattered. Then the roof of the villa flew off. Shwick and the 2 bodyguards were struggling in the raging wind. Damn it. Hurry. Think of something. Shwick hid in a corner. The wind and icy rain attacked him, making him feel cold and terrified like never before. However, the 2 bodyguards were helpless. Although they were also spiritualists, they were helpless. Although they were spiritualists, it didn't mean that they could handle everything. One of the bodyguards didn't have anything to hide behind, and was blown away by the wind. Shwick glanced at the bodyguard who'd been blown away. Useless. Shwick was stunned for a moment. Why did he say something like that out of nowhere? Just then, the other bodyguard realized in horror that tentacles were extending from Shwick's back. Shwick also realized that he couldn't control his body, and stood up. But now, he wasn't afraid of the wind at all. Mr. Shwick. You. So troublesome. You saw me. Looks like I can only kill you. Shwick really wanted to slap himself. Why did he always say such ridiculous things? But the next moment, the tentacles behind him shot out and pierced the bodyguard's chest. Then with a casual swing, the bodyguard was also blown away by the wind. Shwick was about to break down. What exactly happened? Why did he say something so strange? And what were those tentacles? The next moment Shwick fainted. Chen Zhao put away the DV. He'd already recorded enough scenes. The tentacle monster behind Shwick turned back into Nanier. A smile appeared on Chen Zhao's face. Boss, what do we do now? Call an ambulance for him. And the one whose chest you pierced just now, you didn't kill him, right? No. Although his chest was pierced, it was still a few centimeters away from his heart. I controlled it very precisely. Well done. Next, find a place with internet access and upload the scene that just happened. Okay, boss. I know what to do. Don't show yourself and control a stranger. Chapter 3157. Shwick woke up slowly. He felt like his head was about to explode. Looking around, he realized that he was in the hospital. Shwick was about to get up, but he realized that he was handcuffed to the bedside. Shwick frowned. What was going on? Was this someone's prank? Shwick looked up at the call button beside him. He pressed it. Soon a nurse and 2 policemen came in. Who handcuffed me here? Untie me. The nurse approached Shwick carefully. At the same time, she held a talisman in her hand. She drew a few times in the air and hit Shwick. Okay, I've frozen him, the nurse said. What are you doing? What did you do to me? Do you know who I am? Of course, Mr. Shwick, traitor of humans, the nurse said disapprovingly. The policemen still didn't approach. They stood far away. Are you sure he's not in danger? I've sealed his mana source. He won't be able to use magic for 24 hours. Okay, thank you, Madam Witch. The policeman nodded and carefully approached the bed. Mr. Swick, you should understand your situation now, right? Situation? What situation? You're illegally detaining me. I'll make you pay. Let go of me now. I order you. Mr. Swick, stop pretending. Your identity has been exposed. Identity? What identity? Traitor of humans. What do you think you are? Swick was still in a daze. He couldn't understand why the two policemen were saying such strange things. And what did the nurse do to him? Swick didn't feel anything strange. I don't understand what you're talking about. I don't like pranks. I'm warning you for the last time. Let go of me. Swick was starting to get angry. Okay, then how do you explain this? One of the policemen took out his phone and played a video. In the video, tentacles reached out from behind Swick and pierced through a person's chest. How troublesome. You saw it. Looks like I have to kill you. Hee. Stupid human. Sherwaka muttered to himself after throwing the man away. Mr. Swick, do you have any explanation for this video? Wait. This is slander. This is slander. Swick finally understood what had happened. There was no doubt that he had been framed. Swick's first thought was Chun Zhao. Slander? So you don't admit that the person in the video is you? Swick was momentarily speechless. The person in the video was him. He could still vaguely remember what happened last night. But at that time, there must have been something wrong with him. He had been controlled. He was controlled by the tentacle monster. That was me, but I was controlled. Didn't you notice? I fainted and was sent to the hospital, Sherwaka said. Didn't you pretend to be unconscious? The police obviously did not agree with Swick's explanation. After all, humans were more willing to believe what they saw. I know who framed me. I can prove it to you. At that moment, the door to the ward was pushed open. Unfortunately, the two policemen did not believe Sherwaka at all. Mr. Sherwaka, I suggest you tell us the truth. You've already been exposed. There's no point in hiding anymore. Fuck you two idiots. I told you I was framed. Mr. Sherwaka, how do you explain the unusual storm last night? What? Storm? That's none of my business. However, after consulting professionals, we came to the conclusion that the storm last night was very abnormal. Whether it was the formation, the scale, or the speed, they were all very abnormal. It's impossible for nature to brew such a powerful storm. So we have reason to suspect that the storm last night was created by you and your master. Fuck. Sherwaka started cursing. Just then the door was pushed open. Chun Zhao walked in. The two policemen looked at him. Who are you? Chun Zhao pointed at Sherwaka. I'm in charge of investigating him. I'm taking him away now. Chun Zhao took out a document and handed it to the policeman. At the same time, he looked at Sherwaka and smiled. It's him. It's him. He framed me. Sherwaka pointed at Chun Zhao even more agitatedly. Chun Zhao did not retort. Instead, he waited for the two policemen to identify the document. The policeman looked at the document and then called the internal line of the police station, asking for the document number and the official seal. 2 minutes later, the policeman returned the document to Chun Zhao. Sir, he's yours now. Are you sure you don't need us to escort him? He's dangerous. I'm a professional, Chun Zhao said, smiling. Well, I wish you good luck. In movies and TV series, there will always be problems in these parts. I hope my worries are unnecessary. The police said jokingly. I'll try not to let your worries become reality. Chun Zhao lifted Sherwaka violently. No matter how Sherwaka struggled or protested, he could not change Chun Zhao's actions. You can't do this to me. I'm the governor. I'm the governor. Chun Zhao dragged Sherwaka through the corridor of the hospital. Save me. Save me. I'm the governor. I'm Sherwaka. Sherwaka kept asking for help from the passers-by. However, there were many onlookers, but no one helped. In fact, everyone even avoided him. The TV hanging from the ceiling of the corridor started to play Sherwaka's video. Everyone was looking at Swick with a strange expression. Even when Chun Zhao shoved Swick into the car, no one reached out to help him. Sherwaka was in complete despair. How did this happen? How did this happen? You can't do this. Your method is against the rules. You're against the rules. Sherwaka was still shouting, unwilling to give up. Against the rules? Are you talking about me? Chen Zhao drove slowly. You can't frame me. You're against the rules. Mr. Governor, you're good at politics and I'm good at magic. We're good at our own fields, so no one broke the rules. Plus, there are no rules in our war. You should accept reality. Smiling, Chen Zhao said, "Oh right. I told you that I'll make you lose everything, including your wealth. The acting governor of California has already asked the court for you to personally compensate for California's losses." What losses? I don't understand what you're talking about. Of course it's the storm last night. It was you. You did it, not me. Not me. Sure, Weika had been very agitated. Chapter 3158. Chen Zhao drove the car calmly. He turned a blind eye to Shui's hysterical screams. Suddenly, Shui grabbed the steering wheel in Chen Zhao's hands. However, the steering wheel was in Chen Zhao's hands. Shui used all his strength and still couldn't move the wheel. Chen Zhao just reached out and smashed Shui's head against the glass window. Once wasn't enough. Chen Zhao pressed down on Shui's head and smashed it a few more times. He didn't stop until spider patterns appeared on the glass window. By then, Shui's head was already bleeding. Shui collapsed onto the passenger seat, powerless. The car drove to a remote area. Chen Zhao dragged Shui out. Slumped on the ground, powerless, Shui looked at Chen Zhao in fear. What do you want? The last scene, of course. A smile appeared on Chen Zhao's face. Shui was even more terrified. Just then, he saw a woman walk out from behind Chen Zhao. Nan and I also had a malicious smile on her face. Boss. Yes, go according to plan. Nanier held a camcorder in her hand and pointed at Shui with her other finger. To his horror, Shui realized that his body was moving uncontrollably again. Then, a pool of black water appeared around him. Hideous magical beasts formed in the water. Chen Zhao thought for a moment. Then he said to Nanier, "Go hide there. That'll make the scene more realistic. If you stand here, the camera won't shake at all. It'll look like you're posing. It'll be easily seen through." Nanier immediately ran to the grass next to her and began to shoot from behind the grass. Like a villain, Shui acted like he was commanding the black magical beasts. The black demonic beasts charged at him. In fact, Chen Zhao was hitting himself. After this scene, Chen Zhao was covered in sweat. Dark lava enveloped Shui, turning him into an even uglier and more hideous monster. After fighting for a while, Chen Zhao turned and ran. Shui stood where he was, dazed. He was like a puppet the whole time. Apart from watching, he couldn't do anything else. He wanted to cry. Right now he really wanted to cry. But he couldn't even control his tears. Fuck, you can do this? This was completely different from what he'd imagined. To be precise, they were completely different from his past enemies. All of his understanding of the spirit world came from Tang Sei. As a result, he assumed that all spiritualists in the spirit world were like Tang Sei, although he had all sorts of unimaginable abilities. However, it was something that could be resisted by humans. Never in his wildest dreams would he have imagined that the first person he had provoked would be someone else. Just as Chen Zhao had said, "You have politics, I have magic." Everyone was using their own methods to deal with each other in their respective fields. "Boss, it's done." Chen Zhao took the DV from Nanier and replayed it. "My acting skills are not bad, right?" Ehehe. Nanier glanced at Shui on the ground. "Boss, how should we deal with him?" A black ball formed in Chen Zhao's palm. At that moment, Shui suddenly jumped up. "Don't kill me. I still have value. Don't kill me. No, you're worthless." Chen Zhao shook his head. "Mr. Chen, do you think the governor won't make things difficult for you after I die? As long as you're in that position, you won't be able to avoid trouble. Since I can kill you, I can kill the second and third one. You can kill me, but if you use the same method on the second one, you'll only expose yourself." Sui looked at Chen Zhao nervously. Seeing that Chen Zhao didn't attack immediately, Sui added, "I'm different. You have my weakness now. I'm already your best partner." "No, I don't need a partner," Chen Zhao said condescendingly. "You don't have that right either." Sui's face turned green and red. Any humiliation Chen Zhao gave him now, he could only accept it. "Mr. Chen, no matter what, I'm the most suitable." "No, you're not the most suitable. What if I can become the president? Schwick raised his head, and his eyes shone with the light of ambition. You have unparalleled power and unparalleled wealth, but I have political capital. Schwick looked at Chen Zhao. Mr. Chen, you should know that if you have the strongest country in the world as your backing, you'll have unparalleled power. Chen Zhao narrowed his eyes at Schwick, deep in thought. Chen Zhao had to admit that Schwick's suggestion tempted him. How long do I have to wait? 2 years. The election in 2 years is our chance. Are you confident? Who can be confident? Schwick smiled bitterly. I can only say that I'll try my best. Chen Zhao knew that it was very dangerous to get involved in politics in the spiritual world. This wasn't a one-time or two-time cooperation. This was controlling the president of a country. The black ball in Chen Zhao's hand suddenly shot out. Schwick was startled, but the black ball flew past Schwick's side. Boom! Schwick turned around in fear. The forest behind him had completely disappeared. Schwick broke out in a cold sweat. What kind of monster had he provoked? Then I'll give you a chance. Chen Zhao glanced at Nanier. Nanier understood what Chen Zhao meant. She walked to Schwick. Schwick was very afraid of Nanier. He felt that Nanier was more dangerous than Chen Zhao. In some sense, Nanier was indeed more dangerous than Chen Zhao. Chen Zhao's attacks could be seen, but Nanier's attacks were impossible to defend against. Nanier pressed her hands on Schwick's forehead. Schwick didn't resist. He was calmer than ever. He knew that he couldn't resist. No matter what he did, he couldn't. But Nanier's hands only stayed on his forehead for 10 seconds. Schwick didn't feel anything bad. Well, what did you do to me? Nanier smiled. Guess. Without asking, it was definitely a spell that he couldn't understand. Schwick's heart grew heavier. I need to recover my reputation. I need the supernatural organization's help. That video has been edited, Chen Zhao said calmly. What? Schwick was stunned. He didn't understand. That video has been edited. The original has been edited. As long as you follow this train of thought, your reputation can be recovered easily. You didn't plan to kill me? Schwick asked, stunned. If he didn't understand it this way, he couldn't understand why Chen Zhao would put an edited video online. Because someone would find out that the video had been edited. Once they were found out, they would reverse the verdict. Chapter 3159. In fact, before Schwick volunteered to be Chen Zhao's puppet, Chen Zhao had already taken the initiative. Chen Zhao thought of 2 options. The first plan was simple. They just had to kill Schwick. The other option was to control him. But controlling a politician is risky. First of all, playing politics is a high-risk game. The risk of controlling a politician is even greater. That was why Chen Zhao was hesitant and conflicted. He had also considered what Schwick had said earlier. After Zhang San left, Li Si came along. There would be no end to this. Today, Chen Zhao labeled Schwick as a human traitor. However, this method could only be used once. What about next time? Would he use the same trick next time? So Chen Zhao prepared himself. As for what Schwick said about running for president, Chen Zhao didn't mind. What he hoped the most was that he could block the governor obediently. Just the thought of controlling the president was enough to make one's head explode. Therefore, Schwick said that he would use his own power and money to support him in the presidential election. Chen Zhao would be crazy to help him run for president. He had never thought about it before, and he would never think about it in the future. Chen Zhao had even asked him when he was going to run. He was still thinking that there were still 2 years left. When he goes crazy, I'll kill him. Yes, that was what Chen Zhao was thinking now. As for the mind magic that Nanier cast on Schwick, there were no other side effects, nor did it possess any lethality. It only had one function, and it was called prying eyes. In other words, his every move, even the color of his underwear, could be seen. Of course, if he wanted to control a person, placing a curse that was difficult to remove would be the most convenient. Or directly turn him into an idiot, turning him into a marionette like The Walking Dead. However, this kind of magic or curse was too obvious. It was very easy to be discovered. Prying eye, on the other hand, did not have this problem. This kind of non-lethal magic with no side effects was like a virus. Even a magnifying glass would not be able to detect it. Moreover, Nanier was an expert in the psychic element. Therefore, this kind of magic was harder to detect. There was a way to break it, but the problem was that Shwick was being watched all day. How was he going to find someone to crack it? Chen Zhao thought about getting one for his whole family. His wife, his son, and the one outside. No, it was two, and one of them was a man. And his secretary, his assistant, and his subordinates. Chen Zhao would give him something like an inescapable net. Mr. Shwick, we got to know each other after a fight. Chen Zhao looked at Shwick with a friendly smile. I'm glad I don't have to kill you. You should be happy too. Oh right. As for those troubles, you'll have to deal with them yourself. I know. No matter what Shwick was feeling right now, he had to hide his emotions under his calm appearance. Chen Zhao had created a huge problem for him. No, to be more precise, he was the one who had found trouble for himself. However, people were like this. They never thought that they had made a mistake. It was just like how Chen Zhao wouldn't look for reasons on himself. Neither would Shwick. By the way, can you give me Mr. Tang Sei's contact number? The one who's been advising you behind the scenes? Shwick's expression changed. Obviously, now was the time to settle the score. There was no doubt that Shwick had lost. Shwick knew very well why he had lost. Shwick had overestimated the resources he had. At the same time, he had underestimated Chen Zhao's shamelessness. He'd thought that Chen Zhao would use his wealth to find the media, other politicians, or even himself. Shwick was good at dealing with these kinds of enemies. He could argue with the media, fight with other politicians, or compromise with himself. This was what he was best at. But when the opponent didn't use these methods, he'd lost his advantage. His opponent wasn't just a rich man. He was also a spiritualist. He'd barged into a completely unfamiliar field, but chose the strongest opponent in that field. Moreover, the opponent was someone who had no bottom line. Even though he wasn't happy, Shwick still accepted this result. It was useless not to accept it. Chen Zhao wouldn't give him a second round. When Donzer saw the news, he knew that things weren't going well. He didn't know if Shwick was a human traitor. But the person who'd exposed this must be the person they wanted to deal with. Clearly, that person wasn't as easy to deal with as they'd expected. Even if it was the governor, that person would be killed in one go. The ruthlessness of his actions was simply shocking. Donzer packed his luggage and hailed a taxi. Donzer noticed that there was another car behind him. No, there might be more than one car. Donzer felt like all the cars were following him. Sir, we've arrived at the airport. Keep the change. Donzer stuffed $100 into the taxi driver's hand and hurried into the airport. The taxi driver got out of the car and watched Donzer's hurried back. Just then, the car behind stopped in front of the taxi driver, and Nanier got out. Boss, it's done. Your spiritual magic is strong enough to interfere with other spiritualists' consciousness. Boss, his mental strength isn't strong, and his emotions are already in a mess. Coupled with the other cars, he's on the verge of breaking down. His attention isn't on anything else, so I planted a false illusion in him. He thinks that he's gone to the real airport. How long will the illusion last? Leave my magic range, or until I dispel it for him. Let's go. Follow him onto the plane. Right now, Donzer didn't even know that he wasn't at LAX. He felt like his head was going to explode, and that everyone around him was acting weird. He was still in a daze when he boarded the plane. Everyone seemed like an enemy to him, but he also felt like no one was. Sir, please don't block the people behind us. Donzer boarded the plane in a daze. Chen Zhao and Nanier sat behind Donzer. As the plane's engine roared, Donzer's brain slowly calmed down. His emotions have calmed down. My magic is getting weaker and weaker. It doesn't matter, Chen Zhao said calmly. The plane has already taken off. Suddenly, Donzer realized that there were no passengers in the cabin. He vaguely remembered that some passengers had passed through the boarding passage. Why was there no one now? There were still people in the cabin. There were 2 passengers behind him. Maybe there were fewer people on this flight. Perhaps he had remembered wrongly just now. Donzer peeked behind him. That man looked familiar. Was he a taxi driver? That woman? Was she the flight attendant? Chapter 3160. Tang Sei had a bad feeling about this. Tang Sei turned her head abruptly. This man was really the taxi driver. Wait. Asian. He's that person. Tang Sei's entire body began to tremble. It's him. Tang Se shot up from her seat. Tang Se was like a frightened cat, constantly retreating. You recognize me? I thought you'd recognize me earlier, Chen Zhao said indifferently. Do all Asians look the same to you? Sir, I think there's a misunderstanding. Smiling, Chen Zhao looked at Tang Se. There's no misunderstanding. I know it's not. Tang Se quickly forced herself to calm down. Taking a deep breath, she said, Sir, this is definitely not a good place to fight, right? There was a hint of threat in Tang Se's tone. They were in the sky, inside a plane. Tang Se felt that she might not be able to beat Chen Zhao. However, he was still capable of perishing together with his enemy. That's why I didn't use my private plane, Chen Zhao said, smiling. Chen Zhao smiled. I was afraid that our conflict would ruin the private jet I just signed for. Looks like I made the right decision. Tang Se looked at Chen Zhao nervously. She was ready to fight at any time. I rented this plane. It's worth less than 100 million, and it's insured. Even if it crashes, I'll only lose 3 days' worth of income. So you can do whatever you want. Sir, it's not good for anyone to force me. I don't care if it's good or not. I only care if my mood is good or not. If my mood is good, that's the best thing for me. My mood is determined by the choices I make. For example, forcing my enemy to die will make me feel good. Chen Zhao stood up and walked toward Tang Se. So as long as it can make me happy, it's worth it to spend some money. Chen Zhao grabbed in the air. The air pressure in the cabin suddenly shrank. Immediately, the rows of high-pressure glass windows on both sides shattered. The entire plane was shaking violently. Tang Se was tossed up and down by the chaotic airflow in the cabin. It was a painful feeling. Losing control of one's body, manipulated by the airflow and gravity. Tang Se didn't have any autonomy. Is it very painful? Chen Zhao still stood where he was, no matter how the plane shook. Tang Se understood that mutual destruction was no threat to Chen Zhao. If Chen Zhao was really afraid, he wouldn't have destroyed the plane. With a wave of his hand, all the glass shards in the cabin flew toward Tang Se. In the blink of an eye, Tang Se was covered in wounds. The glass shard stabbed deep into Tang Se's body. At this moment, the cockpit door opened. Femutus hurried out and looked at the chaotic cabin. Chen, it's really you. The air pressure in the cabin is out of control. The plane can't continue. We have to think of a way. Chen Zhao casually tossed a parachute bag to Femutus. With a casual sweep, the cabin door was forcefully torn open. Go down first, Chen Zhao said. You might encounter some scary things down there, but don't panic. Femutus quickly put on his parachute and went to the hatch. Looking down, he could vaguely see a small island below. Then he looked back at Chen Zhao. What about you? I'll come down later. Okay. Femutus nodded. When she jumped out of the cabin, she saw that the plane behind her had already lost control and was falling down. The plane was rapidly descending. Tang Se tried to struggle to survive, but the result wasn't ideal. It was easy to struggle but difficult to survive. On the other hand, Chen Zhao and Nanier, they were just waiting to watch the show. They didn't plan to protect themselves at all. I'll kill you. Tang Se pounced at Chen Zhao crazily. But the next moment, the plane shook violently. The air also shook. It shook Tang Se out of her original trajectory. Clearly, the plane had crashed into the ground. I'm dead. Tang Se was flung out of the cabin by the violent tremors and out of the range of the explosion. Tang Se rolled a few times on the ground. When he stood up again, he realized that he was covered in wounds. But he wasn't dead. Not dead. I'm not dead. Haha. I'm not dead. Tang Se was extremely excited. He actually didn't die. This was too surprising. He had personally experienced the crash. He actually didn't die. At the moment, Tang Se couldn't care about the wounds all over his body. He only felt the excitement and joy of surviving. But before he could finish his excitement, amidst the raging flames of the plane, two people walked out indistinctly. In that instant, all his excitement and joy disappeared. The smile on his face also disappeared. Not only did he not die, the two of them didn't die either. How was this possible? How was this possible? Why weren't they dead? He couldn't accept this. The crazy flames burned on the two, but they couldn't even burn their clothes. When they walked out of the flames, it was as if nothing had happened. Even the flames behind them were like an illusion. Chen Zhao looked at Tang Sei, who was about to die. Are you disappointed? Disappointed that we didn't die? Chen Zhao smiled at Tang Sei. Or surprised that you didn't die either? Oh, you should start running now, Chen Zhao said. Hurry up and run. A terrifying monster pushed aside the nearby bushes. The monster's body was extremely tall. Even trees that were more than 10 meters tall were nothing more than short bushes in front of it. The monster's body stretched over the branches and pushed down the trees in front of it. Its head was split open, mouth parts extended out, as if it was searching for something. This was also a type of otherworldly god, but it was an otherworldly god that Chen Zhao had never seen before. Tang Sei was so scared that he peed his pants. His legs were so weak that he couldn't move at all. The monster's aura was too terrifying. The closer it got, the more chaotic his thoughts became. It also didn't get close to Chen Zhao and Nanier. They were intelligent. They knew who they could and couldn't mess with. The last time Chen Zhao came, this mature god of otherworldlings was still a baby. But Chen Zhao's aura was too deep. It turned to face Tang Sei. Clearly Tang Sei was an easy target. You still don't want to run? Or become its food? Tang Sei didn't know where he got the strength from. He suddenly stood up and ran. He didn't want to die here. He also didn't want to become the monster's food and excrement. Fortunately, although the otherworldly god was strong, it was shockingly slow. Chapter 3161. Danzer ran like crazy. Chen Zhao and Nanier didn't intend to chase him at all. Killing a person wasn't enough to vent his anger. Chen Zhao also felt that Danzer's actions were on the edge of what he wanted. He'd schemed against Chen Zhao behind his back, but he hadn't really harmed or threatened Chen Zhao. It just annoyed Chen Zhao a lot. Usually, this would make Chen Zhao unhappy. Chen Zhao would slap him to death. But Chen Zhao didn't hate him at all. Also, Chen Zhao felt that slapping him to death wasn't enough to vent his anger. So he sent him to Demon Island. After Phantius landed, he also encountered a few otherworldly gods. But when she was on the plane, Chen Zhao purposely left his scent on her. A human sense of smell couldn't detect it, but the otherworldly gods could. So no matter if she encountered a otherworldly god or a otherworldly god, their reactions were surprisingly the same. They turned and ran. Run as far as they could. The otherworldly gods were intelligent enough to know that Phantius wasn't Chen Zhao. They couldn't tell what a human looked like. But most mature otherworldly gods had power close to or above the god level. So, they could basically tell who was strong and who was weak. They could tell at a glance how much weight Phantius had, and how much meat he had on him. But just a hint of his scent, even if it was just a little scent, it was enough to make them feel uneasy. Just like how everyone knew that nuclear radiation was fatal, but they were still afraid of cell phone radiation. So, Phantius seemed to be in danger all the way. But in reality, it was extremely safe. There were a few demons, and most otherworldly gods on the island. As long as they encountered Phantius, they wouldn't make a second choice. They would just turn and run. It wasn't until they encountered Chen Zhao that Phantius calmed down. Chen, what's going on here? There are monsters everywhere. I almost died here. It's okay. Those monsters don't hurt people. Help. Just then, Danzer ran past them with a monster chasing after him. The monster clearly wasn't a herbivore. It definitely wasn't playing hide and seek with Danzer. Phantius looked at Chen Zhao. Are you sure? Chen Zhao reached out and grabbed a terrifyingly ferocious-looking god of otherworldlings. Look, it's very obedient. Phantius wasn't an idiot. How could he not tell? Being obedient and being afraid were two different concepts, okay? Nanier brought Chen Zhao and Phantius to a luxurious manor. There were all kinds of facilities here. Nanier, how did you build this manor? Just you, Powell, and the others? Boss, I enslaved those otherworldly gods. As long as I have the materials, I can even build a palace. Chen Zhao was speechless. How dare you say that? I asked you to raise livestock here, but you ordered my cows and sheep around like construction workers. That's too much. Forget it, seeing that this manor is quite comfortable. I'll let her off this time. Nanier, Powell, and the others all lived here. There were all kinds of entertainment facilities and equipment here. There was even a signal base station. Chen Zhao estimated that if he gave them another 100 people, they wouldn't be able to survive. They could even hold a gala. Chen Zhao didn't plan to stay for long. Since he was already here, he might as well stay for the night. Fantas didn't sleep well the whole night. Most importantly, the otherworldly gods outside were all crying and howling. It was so noisy that she didn't dare to close her eyes. But she was in a good state. At most, she couldn't sleep for a whole night. Danzer, on the other hand, was much worse. For a day and a night he hid bitterly, avoiding those otherworldly gods. After coming into contact with the otherworldly gods, he also discovered some characteristics of the otherworldly gods. They had strong spiritual power, but their magic attacks were rather ordinary. Most of them were spiritual spells. Most of them were illusion spells. A small portion of them were black magic and curse magic. Most otherworldly gods didn't have vision or hearing. A small portion of them had vision and hearing, but their senses were weak. So there were still ways to avoid these otherworldly gods. If it was a normal spiritualist with such strong spiritual power, it would be very difficult for Danzer to hide. It would be very difficult for Tang Sei to hide from such a spiritualist. As long as he could avoid their spiritual power, he could basically avoid their senses and tracking. Danzer just happened to know how to avoid their spiritual power. And Danzer happened to know how to avoid their spiritual power. Hiding spiritual power was a very niche spell. Danzer had always thought that this spell he had learned was useless. But now, he was relying on this method to stay alive. Staying alive was even more painful than running for your life. There was nothing here except monsters. All kinds of monsters of all shapes and sizes. All kinds of creatures of all shapes and sizes. In any case, they were the kind that couldn't be messed with. Only it eats your share, not you eat its share. Danzer was tired and hungry, but there was almost nothing here that could be eaten. Plus, after the crash, he was covered in wounds. Suddenly, Danzer's feet sank, and half of his body sank into the ground. Then Tang Sei suddenly felt something wrapped around his lower body from the ground. Danzer was scared out of his wits. There had to be some monster below. Danzer didn't have time to struggle before he was dragged underground. The cave was simply too narrow, and Tang Sei was practically dragged to the deepest part of the cave through friction. When he was dragged to the bottom floor, he saw a dozen strange-looking monsters. Danzer trembled in fear as he looked at the monsters surrounding him in horror. The spiritual power of these monsters was mixed together. Even the air was distorted by this chaotic spiritual power. Just then, a figure appeared in the crowd of monsters. It was a demon. Although he didn't recognize the god of outliers, he recognized demons. There was a huge difference between demons and god of outliers. Human, are you with the mad demon? Mad demon? Who is it? Tang Sei was a little confused, and his face was full of question marks. The human who fell from the sky with you today. Are you talking about that man or that woman? That man is the mad demon. He's a demon. Danzer was shocked. No, he's a human, the demon said. Then why do you call him the mad demon? This used to be our Lord's territory, but that human killed our Lord and enslaved us. The demon recounted its bloody history. It was Danzer's first time seeing a demon cry. What are these things? Are they demons too? They're called the god of outliers. The demon shook its head. Anyway, they're on my side now. Human, since you're not the mad demon's partner, you should be his enemy, right? What about the ones outside? They're also the god of outliers. They're our partners too. No, they're enslaved. They're just cattle raised by the mad demon, the demon said. He views the god of outliers as food. He raises and slaughters them at will. Chapter 3162. Those otherworldly gods outside. Them? They're raised by that person? And they're used as meat? That's right. The demon nodded. Danz felt a chill in his heart. The uneasy feeling grew in his heart. Who exactly had he offended? Those terrifying monsters. In the outside world, even one of them would definitely be a catastrophic existence. Or even far beyond that. But here, groups of them were actually Chen Zhao's meat. Danz couldn't accept this. Danz placed his hopes on the devil and the group of unusual gods. So you want to work with the alien gods and overthrow that person's rule? Not enough. The demon shook his head. Even if we can control the alien gods outside, We can't defeat that man. So many alien gods, plus you and me, can't we? The demon glanced at Dance. Who do you think you're facing? The mad demon's power isn't something we can fight against. Then what do we do? First, strengthen and increase our power. Then we can challenge the mad demon. Increase my strength? How? Lure the alien gods outside into our trap, defeat them, and then devour them. Can the alien gods really be eaten? Are you sure I won't become like them? Dance had another question. Were you sure it was okay to discuss devouring them in front of the alien gods? The alien gods themselves are very powerful, but they're destined to be food for even more powerful beings. For you and me, they have unparalleled value. You'll understand their value in the future. Are you sure it's okay to talk about this in front of them? They eat more of their own kind than you can imagine, the demon said. Even young ones are their favorite. Then how much do we need to strengthen to defeat that person? According to my estimation, we can barely protect ourselves before him if we devour 10,000 alien gods. Are you kidding me? I never joke. There shouldn't be 10,000 otherworldling gods on the entire island, right? There are more otherworldly gods on Demon Island than you can imagine. Demon Island is also much bigger than what you see. There are also many otherworldly gods underground. And there is even a mother body. Even so, we can't possibly devour 10,000 otherworldly gods, can we? You don't have to do anything and go feed those otherworldling gods. But if you are willing to work hard, we still have hope. The devil's tone seemed firm, but Tang Sei still felt sad. This was his final stubbornness. Stubborn my ass. Alpha was actually one of Chen Zhao's henchmen. He was leading the rebellion against Chen Zhao's otherworldly gods. Actually, it was all for Chen Zhao to nurture a higher level god of otherworldlings. The so-called resistance against Chen Zhao's violence was just a false goal and an excuse. As for his penetrating gaze and emotions, it was just because he had been acting for so long that he had become an actor. Nanier was his main person in charge. Saving Donzer was just a temporary mission he had received. The mission's main purpose was to make Donzer suffer. Alpha was very satisfied with his current job, position, and even his current status. As a demon, Alpha was able to be kept by the current boss after the previous boss retired. It was definitely not because of his loyalty. These words were enough to describe Alpha's personality and style. He was as timid as a mouse, bullying the weak and fearing the strong. After the previous boss retired, Alpha decisively switched sides and latched onto Chen Zhao's thigh. First, he betrayed the location of his hidden companions. Then he knelt down and licked Nanier's thigh. Although he was an actor, Alpha didn't dare to give Chen Zhao a bad nickname. As for whether devouring otherworldly gods could increase one's power, it could, but the effect was mediocre. The demon's improvement was more obvious. But there was a threshold. After reaching a certain level, it would be very difficult to rely on devouring otherworldly gods to increase one's power. The pets at Chen Zhao's house had already reached their limit. Boss, Alpha has already contacted that human. Yes. Just report to me occasionally. You don't have to tell me every move. Chen Zhao looked at Famtis. Famtis, I'm going back to LA. Do you want to go? I realized that after overcoming the fear brought by those monsters, this place doesn't seem that bad. I plan to stay here for a few days. You don't have any plans to go far, right? Okay, you can stay here. When you want to go back, ask Nanier to arrange it. At 10 in the morning, the ship for Chen Zhao arrived. Actually, if Chen Zhao was alone, he wouldn't need a ship. This ship had been prepared for Famtis. Since he was already here, Chen Zhao didn't plan on letting the ship go for nothing. When Chen Zhao returned to LA, it was already the next day. In these 2 days, Chen Zhao had been paying attention to Schwick's situation. He had to admit that he was an experienced politician. When Chen Zhao didn't stab him in the back, Schwick quickly changed the unfavorable information on the internet. He was really good at this. He knew how to use the fact that the video had been modified to counterattack. There were still a series of voices online questioning whether Schwick was a traitor or not. But Schwick could return to the governor's position without any resistance. Even if there were people who doubted him, they couldn't use a modified video to make a governor step down. Chen Zhao didn't plan on contacting Schwick. Of course, Shwick wouldn't contact Chen Zhao. Chen Zhao flipped through the news on his phone. Suddenly, he saw a piece of news. It was a picture taken by a low-altitude weather satellite. A huge shadow was discovered in the deep sea of the Pacific Ocean. The shape of this giant shadow resembled that of a fish. But there was a cruise ship above the shadow. The cruise ship was only 1/5 of the shadow's length. But this news belonged to a third-rate online media. Most of the time, this kind of media was fake and exaggerated. Therefore, when most people saw this news, they either doubted or denied it. No one believed that the satellite photo was real. But Chen Zhao knew that the photo was real, because the main character in the photo, the shadow, was Amon. Amon's body had grown quite a bit recently. Every time Amon's power grew, his body would change. The first time he kept growing. The second time he shrunk slightly. This was the third time, and he grew bigger again. This time, his growth speed was much faster than the previous times. Chapter 3163. Amon was more than 2,000 meters tall. He looked like a reef shadow under the water. Some people thought it was a fake photo in the comments section. There were also some who thought it was Reef's shadow. Only a small number of people would think that this picture was real. After all, theoretically, the gravity of the world couldn't support such a large creature. Once the creature's weight exceeded a certain threshold, the creature's muscle tissue would need to change to support its weight. At least, humans couldn't simulate and calculate the biological structure of such a large carbon-based creature. When Chen Zhao returned home, he suddenly received a call from West. "President, we received a mission." "Huh? Is it difficult?" Now, the supernatural organization received at least dozens of missions every day. Most of them could be taken care of by an outer member. Only a few needed core members. Furthermore, there were only a few missions that required the cooperation of a party every month. Until now, there hadn't been a mission that could make West ask for Chen Zhao's help. So, as soon as West spoke, Chen Zhao naturally thought that the mission was difficult. "President, you have a pet called Amon, right?" West asked after a moment of silence. West hadn't seen Amon himself, but he'd heard others talk about it. A few people in the supernatural organization had seen Amon before. West also knew that Chen Zhao kept a bunch of strange magical beasts at home. West was also curious about how big the so-called biggest pet in Chen Zhao's family was. "Yes, is it related to Amon?" Chen Zhao asked. "Is it because of the weather satellite photo?" "Yes, it's related to Amon," West answered. "It's also because of the weather satellite photo." "And then? What exactly is it?" "Someone wants to capture Amon." "Ah, capture Amon?" "Yes, the super-rich Becky Lou Lisha, ranked 6th on the Forbes list," West said. West said, "She offered $100 million to hire the supernatural organization to find Amon. If they succeed, she will pay us $2 billion. Chen Zhao sucked in a cold breath. Becky Lou Lisha was too arrogant. $2 billion just to capture Amon? Does Becky Lou Lisha own a zoo? No. She seems to have been a paranormal and strange creature lover for a long time. She has a hobby of collecting strange creatures. $2 billion. Chen Zhao was also very tempted, even if the money was placed in the supernatural organization's account. However, he couldn't sacrifice Amon for $2 billion. West paused and said, "As long as we can find Amon, we can get $100 million. West was reminding Chen Zhao. Without Chen Zhao's permission, they couldn't even capture Amon. He couldn't really do it. However, if it was just a search, it should be possible. He only came to the supernatural organization. No, she even found quite a number of spiritualists who don't belong to any organization. It seems like they are determined to carry out this hunting mission." Chen Zhao frowned. This meant that even if the supernatural organization didn't accept this mission, Chen Zhao wouldn't be able to do it. There would still be others who would take it. Chen Zhao thought for a moment and said, "I'll personally participate in this mission." "Got it, President." West did not ask what Chen Zhao planned to do. Anyway, he couldn't change Chen Zhao's mind no matter what. $2 billion smells good. However, sacrificing Amon was out of the question. However, with Amon's current size, it was almost impossible for him to completely avoid the attention of humans. After all, there were all sorts of satellites in the sky. Moreover, Amon would only grow larger day by day. Due to the influence of the spiritual qi in the world, his power kept increasing. Moreover, his growth rate was much faster than Qinzhao's other pets. This was because he was huge, so he could breathe in and out more spiritual qi than other pets. And this process of growth continued for a long time. Qinzhao didn't know what Amon's limit was. It was hard for a ship that was a few hundred meters long to not be detected by satellites. Moreover, this was a beast that was thousands of meters long. Amon wasn't the biggest headache for Qinzhao. The real headache was Little Nine, the Hydra. The Hydra was said to have no limit. Moreover, Little Nine was already larger than Amon. Moreover, it didn't need to eat now. At least, it wasn't necessary. Little Nine hid in the deep sea every day. Every night, it would breathe clouds and absorb the essence of the sun and moon. Qinzhao suspected that Little Nine would grow to the size of an island. If Little Nine continued to grow like this, it would be completely exposed one day. So Qinzhao planned to let Amon be exposed at the right time. Of course, it was according to Qinzhao's plan. He wanted to expose Amon in a way that people could accept. Becky Lu Lisha's capture operation might be an opportunity. Becky Lu Lisha quickly replied to the supernatural organization. She accepted the people sent by the supernatural organization. However, this operation wasn't led by the supernatural organization. Becky Lu Lisha had invited many famous and powerful spiritualists in the world. They'd all been hired with a large sum of money. Many of them were more famous than the supernatural organization. So the supernatural organization was just an extra in this hunting team. Or rather, just to make up the numbers. Apart from Qinzhao, the supernatural organization had also invited Gaia. Gaia treated this as a vacation, and happily accepted Qinzhao's invitation. When Qinzhao and Gaia arrived at Becky Lu Lisha's manor, the first thing they saw was a T-Rex skeleton. Moreover, with their eyesight, they could tell that the Tyrannosaurus Rex skeleton was real. He had to admit that Becky Lu Lisha was really rich and overbearing. Under the guidance of the servant, the two of them entered the manor villa. Many people had already gathered in the hall. There were Asians, Caucasians, and black people. There were about 20 of them. That's a lot of people, Qinzhao whispered. Do you think you're rich or Becky Lu Lisha is? Because Dashan beer wasn't listed, Forbes couldn't find out how much money Qinzhao had. So Qinzhao wasn't on the list. However, Qinzhao's wealth was definitely not lower than anyone on the Forbes list. Just then, a noblewoman in formal attire appeared on the balcony of the second floor. Ladies and gentlemen, hello. I'm Becky Lu Lisha. Everyone looked up at Becky Lu Lisha. I'm glad that you accepted my invitation. You should know the purpose of this operation, right? Does anyone else need me to repeat it? Chapter 3164. Everyone here knew what was going on. Moreover, every single one of them was a spiritualist. Since they'd accepted this mission, they naturally had some understanding of it. Just then, a skinny black man stood out. Ms. Becky, I heard that you're interested in strange creatures? Yes. Becky Lu Lisha nodded. Sir, what can I do for you? A cloud of black smoke whizzed out of the man's shoulder. After it dissipated, a red-eyed raven appeared. How much is my raven worth? The man asked. What's so special about it? Blood-eyed raven. Someone beside him said. It eats human souls. It's not valuable at all. Becky Lu Lisha shook her head. Why? The skinny black man asked, somewhat displeased. It doesn't look special at all. Everyone laughed. Some laughed at Becky Lu Lisha's short-sightedness, while others laughed at the man's miscalculation. Just then, the wide wall of the hall suddenly opened. An entire row of Becky Lu Lisha's collection appeared. There were magical beast skeletons, as well as creatures soaked in containers. Every item in the collection was in a strange shape. Qinzhao and Gaia also realized that some were magical beasts they'd seen or recognized before. Some were big, some were small, some were low-level, and some were high-level. Qinzhao even realized that there was a very weak demon in Becky Lu Lisha's collection. To be able to collect so many magical beast skeletons, it was clear that Becky Lu Lisha was connected to the spiritual world. Moreover, Becky Lu Lisha had a good appetite. As long as it was a strange magical beast, It would be in her collection list. Just then, a spiritualist stood out with a glass bottle in his hand. Inside the glass bottle was a very small magical beast. The magical beast's body emitted a faint light. What about this little guy? Give me a price. This is. The magical beast in the bottle looked weak. It lay at the bottom of the bottle. Chen Zhao realized that the weak magical beast in the bottle actually had a familiar aura. This is an elemental apostle, the spiritualist said. Apparently, if it can be trained, it can reach the level of an elemental lord one day. Elemental lord? He suddenly remembered that he'd once killed an elemental lord underground. This little guy is an elemental lord? I'm not interested in its strength, but this little guy seems a bit interesting. How much are you going to sell it for? Although Becky Lulisha was not a spiritualist, she was a rather successful businesswoman. She knew how to make a deal, and could get what she wanted at the lowest price. 10 million, the spiritualist said. Originally, everyone thought that Becky Lulisha was the kind of person who was rich and unreasonable, and threw money around. But Becky Lulisha shook her head. It's not worth that much. Do you know that there is only one of it in the entire world? You definitely won't be able to find a second elemental apostle. I told you, it's not worth that much. Then how much do you want? $100,000, Becky Lulisha said. This is impossible, absolutely impossible. $5 million, $5 million, it's yours. $100,000, Becky Lulisha still said in a flat tone. For million. If you don't want it, then forget it, the spiritualist said. Okay, looks like this deal is impossible, Becky Lulisha said, shrugging. The price difference is so huge, Gaia said in a low voice. It's basically impossible. Chen Zhao shook his head. I bet this deal will definitely go through. And it'll be for $100,000. Frowning, Gaia looked at Becky Lulisha and the spiritualist. Impossible. Trust me. Your business acumen isn't as good as your abilities, Gaia said mockingly. I'm not a business genius, but I'm rich, Chen Zhao said. What does this have to do with being rich? For example, if there are two people who take two artworks of the same value to a bank, and one is a beggar and the other is a rich man, do you think that the two of them will mortgage for the same price? The example you mentioned is not valid here at all. You still don't understand, Chen Zhao said, chuckling. Becky Lulisha saw that the spiritualist was poor. To him, 10 million is a huge sum, and so is 100,000. Because they were all rich, they had similar thoughts. If Becky Lulisha had a competitor, he might ask the spiritualist to raise the price. But now, apart from Becky Lulisha, there's no other buyer. So at this time he only has one choice. He can either accept $100,000 or get nothing at all. Do you think he will accept this deal? Indeed. Just as Chen Zhao had guessed, the spiritualist compromised. Okay, $100,000. It's yours. Gaia stuffed $100 into Chen Zhao's hands. Becky Lulisha got the elemental apostle as she wished. Okay, let's get back to business, Becky Lulisha said. The mission this time is to find and capture the Pacific giant beast. If we find it, then everyone here can split the $100 million equally. Of course, if someone can provide exclusive information, then he can take the $100 million reward alone. What if we manage to capture the beast? $2 billion, Becky Lulisha said. I don't care what method you use. As long as you can capture it, the $2 billion will be yours. As for how you split it and how much effort you put in, it has nothing to do with me. Capture it alive. Dead is fine too, but I want to be whole. Do you understand what I mean? I want the giant Pacific beast intact. If you cause serious damage to the carcass, I'll deduct your fees based on the actual situation. Ms. Becky, you've said so much, but there's no clear evidence to prove that the giant Pacific beast exists. No, the giant Pacific beast really exists. I'm sure of that. I have some evidence in my hands. There are photos and videos, so there's no need to argue about whether it exists or not. Besides, I won't trick you guys into coming here for fun. Seeing that no one objected, Becky Lulisha continued. But before we leave, I need to choose a leader among you, or rather a captain. Chapter 3165. When the 20 people heard Becky Lou Leisha's words, they all looked like they were going to fly. It was as if they were saying, "Yes, I'm the leader." None of them were weak. 2 or 3 of them were even as strong as Gaia. They were all experts that Becky Lou Leisha had found from all over the world. This showed Becky Lou Leisha's connections in the spiritual world. Who's more proactive? Becky Lou Leisha asked. Who's confident enough to be the leader? After a short silence, a middle-aged woman walked out. If no one has any objections, I will be the team leader. The middle-aged woman's face was filled with confidence as she glanced at everyone present. I have an objection. As soon as she spoke, someone objected. An Asian man walked out. He was bald and had a few scars on his head. A monk? Chun Zhao looked at the monk in surprise. However, the monk didn't use the Buddhist hand gestures. He said in half-baked English, I thought that the strong should be respected, and not just anyone can jump out and lead everyone. The middle-aged woman was furious. What did you say? You think I'm not qualified? The monk stared at her, as if she had guessed correctly. The others didn't say anything, but they all had the same expression. So you're qualified? Probably more than you, the monk said indifferently. Then I'll try and see if you're really qualified. Please wait. If you want to fight, go outside. Don't destroy my collection. You can't afford it, Becky Lou Leisha said. The group didn't plan on arguing with their employer. They obediently went to the empty space outside the villa. The middle-aged woman looked at the monk. She waved her hands in the air and drew a magic array. Large numbers of blue vipers surged out of the array. Those blue nightmare vipers were not ordinary snakes. They were magical beasts and weren't strong individually. They were of the wind element, but they were poisonous. They moved very quickly and shot at the monk like beams of blue light. The monk stood in place without moving. The snakes didn't hold back and bit him directly. Humph. The middle-aged woman looked slightly proud. With this standard, he couldn't even block his probing attack, and yet he dared to stand out and provoke him. Just as the middle-aged woman was feeling pleased with herself, the monk suddenly said, Have you finished your attack? Everyone was taken aback as they looked at the monk, who was covered in blue viper venomous snakes. It had to be said that at this moment, the monk looked like one of the comedic scenes in an anime. The middle-aged woman looked at the monk in shock. What was going on? Why didn't he show any signs of being poisoned? Could it be that he had some kind of magic that could neutralize the snake venom in such a short time? Or does he have an extremely strong resistance to poison? However, although the middle-aged woman was surprised, she did not panic. After all, this was just her probing attack. Since snake venom isn't a threat to you, try this. The middle-aged woman switched to another spell, and the magic array in front of her changed again. A large number of wasps swarmed out of the magic array. The wasps swarmed toward the monk like a yellow cloud. As always, Tyrant stood still on the same spot. The wasps stabbed at the monk. Then like rain, they fell one after another. Chen, can you tell? Yes. That bald monk's body is very strong. Chen Zhao stared at the monk's spell. He also analyzed the characteristics of the spell. At Chen Zhao's level, it was no longer a problem for him to analyze the characteristics and structure of other people's spells on the spot. Was this a Buddhist spell? Chen Zhao did not know much about Buddhism, nor had he interacted with Buddhists. However, Buddhist spells were very recognizable. They were not external, but internal and intrinsic. In the past, he had heard that the Buddhists had the best enhancement spells. Now it seemed to be true. This monk did indeed possess a unique enhancement spell. Since you've made your move, it's my turn. The monk looked at the middle-aged woman. Suddenly, the monk clenched his fists and punched at the middle-aged woman. King Kong demon subduing. Instantly, a golden fist flew toward the middle-aged woman. Shocked, the middle-aged woman hurriedly summoned a huge magical beast in front of her. The golden fist smashed into the body of the gigantic magical beast. The gigantic magical beast was sent flying. Even the middle-aged woman was sent flying. The monk turned around and looked at Becky Lou Leisha. Miss Becky, looks like she admits defeat. In that case, I'll nominate you as the leader. Does anyone have any objections? Becky Lou Leisha did not use her power to appoint the monk. Instead, she nominated him. She was reminding the others to step forward if they wanted to challenge. A few of them were itching to give it a try and wanted to make a move. However, they were not confident, so they hesitated. Some people did not care, such as Chen Zhao. It did not matter who was the leader. At this time, Tyrant opened his mouth and said, "Everyone, I believe that there are many among you who are stronger than me, but this doesn't mean that you have to snatch the position of leader. The reason why I stood out is because I have more advantages in this mission." The monk's words were clearly double standards. When he had objected to the middle-aged woman earlier, it meant that the strong should be respected. When he objected to the middle-aged woman earlier, it meant that the strong should be respected. But now he said that it was because he was more suitable to be the leader, not because of strength. "Why?" Becky Lulisha asked. "I have a mystique called Thousand Beasts Link that allows me to communicate with all kinds of beasts. Regardless of whether they are flying in the sky, running on the ground, or swimming in the water, I can use this spell to communicate with the creatures in the sea. It will be more advantageous when I'm looking for the giant Pacific beasts. And after I find the giant Pacific beasts, I can use Thousand Beasts Link to communicate with it. Maybe I can make it surrender without fighting. A living giant Pacific beast should be more valuable than a dead one. You're confident." Becky Lulisha's eyes brightened. The monk shook his head. "I don't know how powerful it is, so I can't guarantee anything." Becky Lulisha thought for a moment and said, "But what does this have to do with you being the leader? Can't you communicate with marine creatures if you're not the leader?" "Of course it's to better cooperate with me. It's fine if I'm not the leader. But if the leader disagrees with me when I'm communicating, wouldn't all my previous efforts be wasted? So, I think I'm more suitable to be the leader. I hope that everyone will listen to my orders during the mission." Chapter 3166. Becky Lulisha was clearly convinced by the monk. The group didn't argue anymore. After all, Becky Lulisha had already set the tone. They didn't want to go against her. The group stayed in Becky Lulisha's manor for the night. Chen Zhao didn't like spending the night in a stranger's house. He didn't like beds, but he also wasn't used to it. Becky Lulisha's manor wasn't smaller than Moon Villa or Mirror Lake Manor. However, it looked quite old. Many buildings and facilities were old. Of course, Chen Zhao wasn't so pampered that he had to stay in his own house. The next day, the group boarded the yacht that Becky Lulisha had prepared. However, Chen Zhao didn't expect Becky Lulisha to go out with them. Since yesterday, Chen Zhao and Gaia had been invisible. Even if it was the female Tyrannosaurus Gaia, she was tall and strong, but she was not so conspicuous in the crowd of all shapes and sizes. As for Chen Zhao, he didn't stand out at all. Therefore, almost no one noticed Chen Zhao and Gaia. Even if they did, no one paid attention to them. This time, they were on a modified fishing boat with a displacement of 6,000 tons. As for what it would look like, it would be changed to a warship. Apart from the displacement, it couldn't reach the level of a warship. It had Vulcan cannons, torpedoes, and missiles. There was also a small submarine and a helicopter. A day passed. Chen Zhao and Gaia drank beer and enjoyed the sea breeze on the second deck. Just then, the middle-aged woman who'd gone against the monk came over. "Are you a couple?" "No, we're just friends." Gaia shook her head. She bent down and picked up a bottle of beer. "Want one?" "Thanks." The middle-aged woman didn't reject. She took the beer and started drinking. "I realized that you two have been hanging out since yesterday. I thought you were a couple, because I don't know anyone else apart from him," Gaia said matter-of-factly. "Of course I can only hang out with him. Aren't you going to try your luck? Look at them. Prophecy, divination, perception. Anything that can be used has been used. If they're lucky, they'll earn 100 million USD. Don't you want to try it all?" Chen Zhao and Gaia exchanged glances. Chen Zhao shrugged and said, "We won't. We're spiritualists who prefer to fight. We don't know how to play around. Let's wait for them to find us and then fight." Gaia looked at the middle-aged woman. "You're a summoner, right? You should have spells to find that giant beast, right? Aren't you going to try?" The middle-aged woman shook her head. "I'm about the same as you guys. I'm also inclined towards fighting." The middle-aged woman looked at the monk, who was at the bow of the ship. The grudge between her and the monk had already been sown. He probably wouldn't let it go so easily. She had lost the battle yesterday. However, this did not mean that she was weaker than the monk. Yesterday's anticlimactic battle simply couldn't explain the difference in their strength. First of all, neither side used any killing moves. In fact, they didn't even use any heavy blows during the battle. As for Tyrant, he took advantage of the disparity in information between both parties. The middle-aged woman was first angered by him, so she made the first move. The monk also knew what she was up to. However, the middle-aged woman knew nothing about him. This was the biggest reason why she lost. However, the difference in strength was definitely not that huge. If they fought for real, it would probably take at least 1 or 2 hours before a winner could be decided. In the past 20 hours, the monk had been communicating with the creatures in the sea. Currently, he only confirmed the direction. He couldn't confirm the exact location and distance. The others also tried their own methods. The information they got wasn't even as good as the monk's. Your summoning spell is interesting, Chen Zhao asked curiously. What level can you summon with all your strength? Chen Zhao asked curiously, although this was a bit of the woman's trump card. The highest level of calamity, the middle-aged woman said. The magical beast you summon is from our world? Or from another world? I know a few schools of summoning magic. My major is otherworld summoning, which mainly summons magical beasts from other worlds. A small number of them are native beasts from Earth, and a small number are hell beasts. Then you should be able to gain our employer's favor. After all, your specialization suits her personal requirements. You think I'm here for money? Isn't that the case? Not really, the middle-aged woman said. Then what's your main goal? My major spell is called the Tire Pact. It's an equality spell. Summoning is a temporary contract. When I sense a suitable magical beast, my soul will resonate with the magical beast and communicate. If everything goes well, we can reach an agreement. Of course, this agreement isn't very binding. It's not a forced contract, just like a human's verbal agreement. However, most of the time, magical beasts won't go back on their word. Instead, the summoner often betrays the contract. I don't understand. What does the Tire Pact have to do with your goal this time? Chen Zhao asked. Do you want to use the Tire Pact to reach an agreement with the Pacific beasts? Gaia seemed to have thought of something. Didn't they say that the Tire Pact is used to summon magical beasts from other worlds? Can the magical beasts in this world also use the Tire Pact? The Tire Pact's main function is to pass through the barriers of space. It doesn't mean that it can only be used on magical beasts from other worlds, the middle-aged woman said. The reason why I'm using the Tire Pact to summon magical beasts is because of the cost-effectiveness. The Tire Pact consumes a lot of magic power. It's too wasteful to use it to summon the native magical beasts of our world. Compared to the magical beasts from other worlds, our world's magical beasts are generally weak, low-level, and have fewer breeds. That's why it's more cost-effective. In other words, you're planning to use the Tire Pact to sign a contract with the Pacific beasts. I told you, this is an agreement, not a contract, the middle-aged woman emphasized. Moreover, according to the weather satellite photo that has been released so far, the possibility of successfully reaching an agreement is too low. I don't even know how big this demonic beast is and how strong it is, so the success rate is very, very low. But you still have a glimmer of hope, right? Of course. If I can really summon such a beast, I won't have to fear anyone, even a country. Then you might have to hide on a small island in the Pacific Ocean for the rest of your life, because no country with a stable regime will allow you to exist. Moreover, the Pacific beasts can only fight in the deep sea. They can't provide any help on land or in shallow waters. Who said so? It's not a bad choice to smash people with it. Chapter 3167. Even Chen Zhao didn't know if she was just saying it out of anger. Summon him on to smash people? This idea was good. At least it was creative. Just as the three of them were chatting idly, the monk below suddenly shouted, "Found it! 200 kilometers to the left. The creatures in the ocean told me that there's a terrifying beast there." Everyone was very excited. Even Becky Lou Leisha in the cabin was alarmed. She hurried out of the cabin. I heard you found the giant beast. Becky Lou Leisha came to the monk and asked directly. Yes, I found it. The monk nodded. Great. Becky Lou Leisha was excited too. The ship moved forward at full speed, splitting the waves and riding the wind. Everyone's eyes and expressions were filled with eagerness. They were ready for a big battle. The middle-aged woman glanced at Chen Zhao and Gaia. You don't seem excited at all. There are so many giant beasts in the ocean, Chen Zhao said unconcerned. Even a whale would be treated as a giant beast. So it's hard to say if that bald head is the Pacific beast we're looking for. Plus, so what if we found it? Are you sure we're not here to give food to the beast? Gaia was also unconcerned. Then what are you here for? To watch the show? The middle-aged woman rolled her eyes. She felt that Chen Zhao and Gaia had been very passive along the way. He treated himself as an outsider. Chen Zhao didn't know if the ship was equipped with rocket propellers. It was more than 200 kilometers, but they arrived in an hour. Anyway, Chen Zhao felt that the ship was flying. Stop, the monk shouted. It's nearby. The ocean-going ship stopped. But other than some waves on the surface of the sea, there was nothing unusual about the surrounding sea for the time being. Are you sure that the big guy is in this area? Becky Lou Leisha asked. I'm sure, the monk said with certainty. I communicated with the sea creatures nearby. They told me that the big guy has existed for a very, very long time. It's an extremely ancient existence. The others weren't too surprised by this answer. Such a huge creature couldn't have grown in a day. It must have existed for a very, very long time. Perhaps it was some kind of ancient prehistoric creature. Then how do we make it float? Becky Lou Leisha asked. She also knew very well that as long as the big guy hid at the bottom of the sea, no one could do anything to it. Although there were a few people on the ship who were proficient in water magic or divine abilities. But in the end, they were not true water-type creatures. When fighting in the deep sea, the first thing they had to face was not the giant sea beasts, but the water pressure and lack of oxygen. Just then, a spiritualist with messy hair stood up. I can make that big guy float to the surface. If you can do it, this check is yours. Becky Lou Leisha was very generous at this time. You can give me the check in advance, the spiritualist said. Becky Larissa smiled and stuffed the check into the psychic's jacket pocket. The other spiritualists were a little jealous. However, this kind of work was too professional. Although they wanted to snatch the job, they did not have any professional skills. The spiritualist stood at the bow of the ship and raised his arms. His palms glowed with a strange multicolored light. The light was like a rainbow. It shot out from the spiritualist's palms and drew an arc in the air before landing on the sponge. After a few minutes, the sea began to churn. It's coming, the spiritualist reminded. Slowly, more and more fish began to jump from the surface. More and bigger. The entire ship was surrounded by those fish. They seemed to be attracted by something and kept jumping out of the sea. Some of the stronger fish even jumped onto the deck of the ship. Suddenly, a huge shadow appeared below. Boom! A huge water column exploded less than 10 meters in front of the bow of the ocean-going ship. Along with the water pillar, a peerlessly terrifying figure also appeared. Everyone was shocked by the shocking appearance. So big. So big. It was a black demon ray over 100 meters long. After it rushed out of the water, it flapped its wings and actually soared in the sky. Everyone was shocked. 100-meter-long beast soared in the sky. It was hard not to look beautiful. Such a terrifying aura. God! This giant beast is a god beast. The middle-aged woman was also dumbfounded. She looked up at the black demon ray in the sky. Oh my God! Is this the monster we're going to catch? Chen Zhao looked at the woman. Let's try your spell. What's it called again? Tire Holy Contract, right? The middle-aged woman didn't even want to try. Try my *SS. It was impossible, okay? When she saw the photo of the weather satellite, she only felt that it was huge. Other than that, she didn't feel anything else. But when she actually faced it, she realized that it wasn't the same concept at all. This terrifying aura and pressure. If she dared to use the Tire Holy Contract on this god beast, the spell would backfire at any moment. The entire holy contract resonated the summoner's spiritual power with the magical beasts. Only then could they form an alliance. But when facing such a ferocious magical beast, forming a contract would only result in the beast taking a few bites. And it would be a few bites of spiritual power. Seeing that the woman didn't move, Chen Zhao was a bit disappointed. He'd wanted to see what was so special about the entire holy contract. But the woman was scared. Chen Zhao lifted his head and looked at the black ray in the sky. He really didn't expect such a huge magical beast to be hiding in the sea. He didn't know how many terrifying magical beasts there were in the water all over the world. The black demon skate looked like a skate, but it was much bigger. Only its tail was different from a normal ray. It had a long, thin, and sharp stinger. Everyone's nerves were taut. They could feel the danger of the black ray in the sky. Suddenly Gaia, who was standing beside Chen Zhao, felt a headache. His body swayed and he almost lost his balance. Chen Zhao reached out to support her. "What's wrong?" "I don't know. My head just hurts." Just then someone on the deck felt a headache too. Then a third, a fourth, a fifth. Even the middle-aged woman couldn't stand still. "Oh no, it's a spiritual attack." A spiritualist came to a realization. Connect our spiritual powers or we'll all die. Connecting their spiritual powers meant that they knew what each other was thinking at the moment. But if they didn't, they would be attacked by the black ray. Chapter 3168. Becky Lulisha was panicking too. She watched as the spiritualists fell one by one in front of her. The remaining ones were barely hanging on. But looking at their bodies, they looked like they were on the verge of collapsing. She knew it was bad. In her panic, she suddenly saw Chen Zhao on the second deck, supporting Gaia with one hand. He didn't seem to be affected at all. Stunned, she looked at Chen Zhao confused. Chen Zhao was looking up at the sky. The spike on the black demon ray's tail was actually a spiritual resonator. Chen Zhao hadn't heard of it before, but he knew how it worked in a moment. When it flew in the sky, its tail kept vibrating at a very high frequency. This spiritual resonance was similar to audio resonance. It made people confused. Of course, spiritual resonance was lethal, but not destructive. "You're Mr. Chen from the supernatural organization, right?" Becky Lulisha asked. Chen Zhao was stunned. He looked down at Becky Lulisha. Chen Zhao had always thought that he was invisible. He didn't expect Becky Lulisha to remember his background. "Mr. Chen, why aren't you affected?" "My magic system is special," Chen Zhao said calmly. "So I'm not affected. Then why am I fine?" "The big guy in the sky attacks with spiritual power. You can't even release your spiritual power, so of course it won't affect you. Plus, it doesn't matter if you're affected or not." "Then hurry up and think of something," Becky Lulisha shouted anxiously. Chen Zhao shook his head. "I can't fly." Gaia's head was about to explode, but she couldn't help but roll her eyes. "What do we do now?" Becky Lulisha turned to the monk and the others. The monk and the 4 spiritualists hadn't fallen yet, but they looked like they were struggling too. They looked like they were going to fall at any moment. "That big monk should have a solution," Chen Zhao said casually. The monk looked up at Chen Zhao. If they weren't facing a great enemy, he would want to fight Chen Zhao to the death. But he didn't have time to care about Chen Zhao now. The monk put his palms together and shouted, "Skunda subdues demons." Tyrant's entire body glowed with golden light as a towering radiance burst forth. In the next instant, Tyrant had already transformed into a 10-meter-tall Dharma idol. The Dharma idol unleashed a 10,000 Buddha seal at the black demonic skate in the sky. The black demonic ray screeched in pain and dove into the water, creating huge waves. Everyone came to their senses, although his head still hurt a little. However, the lethality of mental attacks was rather limited. As long as there was no mental damage, the victim would recover quickly. Everyone tensed up and prepared for the upcoming battle. Crash! The black demonic skate dashed out of the sea again and charged toward the ocean-going ship. "Fight! Fight!" Tyrant's Dharma form took the lead and leaped out, waving its fists and punching the lower jaw of the black devil ray. Although the monk's Dharma form was only 10 zhang tall, it was still a far cry from the black demonic skate's 40 zhang tall. However, The monk's Dharma form was so powerful that it sent the black devil ray flying backward with a single punch. At this moment, a light arrow pierced through the air. It hit the black demonic ray's abdomen. Another series of explosions followed. At the same time, chains appeared around the black demonic ray. Shwa! The chains wrapped around the black demonic ray. Another bolt of lightning fell from the sky and hit the black demonic ray. The middle-aged woman acted too. She summoned a dozen giant demon hounds that were more than 20 meters long. Compared to the black demonic ray, these giant demon hounds were like adults and babies. But in terms of ferocity, these giant demon hounds weren't any weaker than the black demonic ray. They leaped into the air, and the dozen demon hounds hung onto the black demonic ray's body. It's finally under control. The middle-aged woman heaved a long sigh of relief. Chen Zhao glanced at her and said, "That's a god-level magical beast." "But didn't it already?" Before the middle-aged woman could finish, the dozen demon hounds hanging onto the black demonic ray were suddenly sent flying. In the next instant, the chains that had been restraining it also shattered. Seeing that things weren't going well, the monk's Dharma form went up and received a series of punches. The black demonic ray's aura surged, and a terrifying pressure shattered the monk's Dharma form. The monk spat out a mouthful of blood. He was clearly injured. The others didn't feel good either. The black demonic ray was too powerful. Their previous attacks didn't hurt it at all. Instead, it was completely enraged. A god-tier demonic beast was in existence that was close to the half-step Shangqing realm, or even higher. None of them had even reached the half-step Shangqing realm. They couldn't pose a threat to a god-level magical beast at all. Just then Gaia attacked. Gaia transformed into her dragon form. Although Gaia was still in his dragon whelp form, Gaia's dragon whelp form had already reached 30 meters. Even though she was a baby dragon, she still had the dragon might. Gaia's dragon might couldn't threaten the black demonic ray, but at least she wouldn't be affected by the black demonic ray's power. Gaia's level was much lower than the black demonic ray's, but her speed was fast enough, and she was even more agile. She flew above the black demonic ray's head and grabbed onto its back with her 4 dragon claws. The black demonic ray's back was very slippery. Gaia had to dig her claws into its skin to lock onto it. Even so, Gaia couldn't hurt the black demonic ray at all. Gaia opened her mouth and spat out a mouthful of dragon breath at the black demonic ray's head. The black demonic ray felt pain again. It was a water magical beast after all. Gaia's dragon's breath was still quite lethal to it. The black demonic ray hurriedly dove into the sea. Gaia circled in the air. "Go! Leave this area immediately!" Becky Lu Lisha called out. "Miss Lu Lisha, aren't we going to catch that beast?" "That's not my target," Becky Lu Lisha said. "Let's go." Everyone secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Luckily, their target wasn't the black demonic ray. Gaia was still circling in the air on guard. The black demonic ray was being beaten up by everyone. Plus, Gaia was threatening it. It didn't come out anymore and hid in the sea. But everyone was depressed again. Did they find the wrong target? Then would they have fought for nothing? Gaia didn't return to the deck until the ship was dozens of kilometers away. She returned to her human form. Becky Lu Lisha came up and looked at Gaia in surprise. "Miss Gaia, you're so strong. What was that dragon transformation spell?" Chapter 3169. The dragon that Gaia had transformed into. It was a bit eye-catching. But none of the people present were weak. So, they didn't attract too much attention. Gaia had been able to chase away the black ray mostly because of her natural restraint. The black ray's pressure was ineffective against Gaia. But Gaia wouldn't fight it head-on. Her speed was also higher than the black ray. Plus, her dragon breath could damage the black ray. This made it seem like she was the best. In reality, it was mostly luck. Moreover, the black ray didn't plan to fight them to the death. Otherwise, the outcome would be hard to predict. Becky Lalisa was very friendly to Gaia. She pulled her over, as if she wanted to have a long talk. Just then Monk walked up to Chen Zhao. "You're also a member of our team. Why did you just watch and not do anything?" Facing Monk's question, Chen Zhao was indifferent. "I couldn't reach. Plus, I wasn't the only one who didn't do anything." Facing Chen Zhao, Monk felt an inexplicable anger. What department are you in? Strengthening. Tyrant squinted his eyes. There was still doubt in his eyes. I don't want any hooligans in this team. Monk almost said Chen Zhao's name. Suddenly, Chen Zhao reached out and pinched Monk's forehead. Who are you calling a hooligan? Monk was shocked and furious. He didn't expect Chen Zhao to suddenly attack. He wanted to pull his head back, but Chen Zhao was too strong. He couldn't. Furious, he punched Chen Zhao's chest. But his fist almost broke. Chen Zhao didn't move at all. Who are you calling a hooligan? Let go! Monk yelled. Apologize, Chen Zhao said calmly. Sangarama seal. Monk's palms glowed with golden light, and he slapped them toward Chen Zhao's chest. But Chen Zhao still didn't move. The strength of the hand that was pinching the monk's bald head increased by a few notches. Monk felt that his head might really explode. Are you just going to watch? Monk roared in anger. But the others didn't like Monk. Even though he was the leader in name. But not everyone was convinced by him. Or rather, no one respected him. So, everyone watched Monk and Chen Zhao as if they were watching a show. No one came to dissuade him. Even Becky Lulisha was the same. Ah! Tyrant felt a splitting headache. Sir, we're on the same team. Are you going to kill me? Chen Zhao mentioned the monk. Yeah, if you can't even say sorry, you can go die. All right. Sorry, I was wrong. The monk finally compromised. Suddenly, Chen Zhao pressed down hard. The monk fell to the ground, his head hitting the ground heavily. The metal deck of the ship rumbled under the impact. The monk was about to jump up when Chen Zhao suddenly stepped on the back of the monk's head. Remember, there are at least 10 people on this ship who can crush you to death. Before you lose your temper, you better think about whether you can defeat them or not. Stepping on the monk, Chen Zhao said, Do you really think you're the captain just because you got the title? Chen Zhao kicked the monk away. Tyrant was ashamed and indignant, but the surrounding people were looking at him with schadenfreude. At this moment, his authority on the ship was completely gone. However, this place wasn't like the land. Even if the monk wanted to retreat, there was no way for him to do so. So, he could only brace himself and stay. Just then, Becky Lulisha walked up to Chen Zhao. Mr. Chen, how about you be the captain? Sorry, I'm afraid I don't have the ability. Smiling, Chen Zhao rejected Becky Lulisha's suggestion. Becky Lulisha was also a bit angry. Chen Zhao had embarrassed the monk, and now he was blocking the hands-off manager. Wasn't this undermining him? Mr. Chen, everyone knows your ability. Being strong doesn't mean you have to be the captain. You don't just have to be strong. If that bald guy is the standard, at least 10 people on this ship can be the captain. Then why don't you pick one? Becky Lulisha asked. Chen Zhao was about to reject when he glanced at the middle-aged woman beside him. I think this lady is good. Becky Lulisha was a bit hesitant. After all, the middle-aged woman had been eliminated by the monk. She's a summoner, Chen Zhao said. She summons magical beasts. No one knows the habits of magical beasts better than her. Becky Lulisha looked at the middle-aged woman. Miss Familati, what do you think? If you don't object, I'm willing to be the captain. Then you'll be the captain, Becky Lulisha said. Becky Lulisha said, I also hope that the others can be a good match for Ms. Malati and not go against her. Becky Lulisha was also supporting Familati. She was the weakest in the group, but she had money. Most people obviously didn't come here for a vacation. They were here for her money. Everyone was waiting for her salary. As everyone's breadwinner, she had the absolute right to speak. Compared to the monk, everyone had a much better impression of Familati. There were also a few who were much stronger than Familati, but they had the same idea as Chen Zhao. They didn't even bother to fight for the captain position. To them, they wouldn't lose a cent of their commission, even if they didn't become the captain. Ms. Becky, you said that the magical beast earlier wasn't the one you were looking for? Yes. Are you sure? The magical beast in the photo is more than 10 times bigger than a freighter. And the magical beast just now is only a little bigger than our ship. So I'm sure that it's not the magical beast I'm looking for. Everyone's expression changed. They were already exhausted from dealing with the previous magical beast. As for the bigger magical beasts that Becky Lulisha mentioned, could they really handle them? The size of a magical beast didn't necessarily represent its strength. But when the size of a magical beast reached a certain level, it would still determine its strength. Especially when the size of the magical beast was as big as Becky Lulisha had described. It was so big that it was beyond their imagination. Did magical beasts of this size really exist? Even if it appeared before them, could they really deal with it? Don't worry, Becky Lulisha said. I have other preparations too. What preparations? Secrecy. Secrecy? You're afraid that we'll leak it? Also, even if we do we have to find a magical beast? Familati said unhappily. Becky Lulisha thought about it and realized that it made sense. Up there. Chapter 3170. Everyone looked at Becky Lulisha confused. Above? What above? Satellites, Becky Lulisha said smiling. Satellites? What about satellites? I know an organization. I'm familiar with their leader. He lent me a satellite. This satellite is a super weapon. You can think of it as a nuclear weapon that attacks from the sky. Everyone gasped. They might not understand high-tech weapons, but they could understand nuclear weapons. But nuclear weapons could still understand it. What organization is so strong? They actually have nuclear weapons. Chen Zhao was doubtful of Becky Lulisha's words. After all, with the 5 hooligans of the United Nations, would they allow others to have nuclear weapons? Huh. Becky Lulisha chuckled. She obviously knew what Chen Zhao meant. This organization only has 2 such satellite weapons, she said. Their orbits are both above the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans. They don't enter the airspace of any sovereign country. Once they get within 300 kilometers of a sovereign country, the country has the right to shoot them down. Chen Zhao smiled. Even so, the organization's strength still left him dumbfounded. An organization with powerful weapons was beyond his understanding. But after hearing that Becky Lulisha planned to use the satellite weapons, Chen Zhao decided to change the plan. He didn't want Amon to show up. It was really dangerous. Even at Amon's current level, he probably couldn't handle a nuclear weapon. Plus, he didn't know what kind of attack it was. So Chen Zhao didn't want Amon to take the risk. But with Becky Lulisha's guarantee, the mood of the people on the ship also relaxed. Chen Zhao sympathized with these naive kids. If they really had to use the satellite weapons, they would be the first to die. The lethality of this type of satellite weapon was certain. More importantly, they were mostly wide-range weapons. If they got hit at close range, the ship would be destroyed and the people would die. Chen Zhao didn't know what they were happy about. Chen Zhao glanced at them. It seemed like he had to change the plan. He had to have Amon show up in another way. As for finding Amon, what a joke. Amon was hiding on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean. An ocean-going ship wouldn't be able to find Amon even after a year. Mr. Chen, thank you for speaking up for me during the day. Chen Zhao chuckled. I'm just being honest. Compared to that bald guy, I want you to be the captain more. I think you're more qualified. Familati also smiled. She knew that she couldn't be as carefree as Chen Zhao. Mr. Chen, you better be careful of Xianzheng. Xianzheng? Oh, you mean that bald guy. Chen Zhao froze for a moment, and then immediately realized. Him. What's there to be careful about? I really don't think that guy would dare to do anything to me. I saw the tattoo on his neck. It's the symbol of the Shallow Water Bay Organization. Shallow Water Bay Organization? What organization was this? Is it a diving club? The Shallow Water Bay Organization is a very complicated supernatural organization. Their business scope is very wide. Bodyguards, assassins, exploration, grave robbing, kidnapping, and smuggling are all part of their business. Looks like I'm in big trouble. Chen Zhao scratched his head and said in distress. Familati looked at Chen Zhao. She couldn't tell why he was troubled. All right, looks like my worries were unnecessary. I still have to thank you for the reminder. Mr. Chen, what do you think about this operation? Nothing. So you don't have high hopes for this operation? Whatever you think. Chen Zhao finished the beer in his hand. I'm going to rest. Looking at Chen Zhao's back, Familati shook her head with a bitter smile. It was difficult to get anything out of this guy. She didn't know that Chen Zhao's idea was that he couldn't beat others in scheming, so he should keep his mouth shut. As long as he used his true thoughts to fool others, he could avoid other people's schemes. This was the method that Manit had taught him. It didn't matter if it worked or not. Anyway, Chen Zhao felt like he was an otherworldly master. Under the night sky, no one noticed Chen Zhao leave the cabin. Chen Zhao flew directly into the sky and kept flying higher. Chen Zhao wanted to see what the satellite weapon looked like. Chen Zhao flew until he was 200,000 meters in the sky and finally found the satellite weapon. It was Chen Zhao's first time seeing such a strange-looking satellite. Chen Zhao had seen many satellites, from low-altitude weather satellites to high-altitude signal satellites and spy satellites. Chen Zhao knew them all. But Chen Zhao really found this satellite strange. The 5 spheres were symmetrically divided into a circle and connected by metal. In the middle of the 5 spheres was an octahedron cone with 2 sharp ends. And on all 8 sides of the cone, there were cryptic red runes that were difficult to understand. It wasn't as high-tech as Chen Zhao thought. It was magic, or rather a combination of technology and magic. The 5 orbs around it were also engraved with magic inscriptions. These runes were used to absorb cosmic rays. They were also stored in the magic device inside the spheres. When needed, the energy would be shot down through the octahedron cone. It was surprisingly interesting. Chen Zhao wondered if he should take the satellite home to study. After a long while he gave up on the idea. Moreover, he had done something to this satellite. Only then did he leave satisfied. When Chen Zhao landed on the deck, he thought that no one noticed him. But Farmalati stood on the deck and waited for Chen Zhao to land. Hey, what a coincidence. You don't look like you can't reach the enemy. Your flying solves most problems. Ha! Even if I can fly, it doesn't mean I'll jump onto a monster's head to fight. I think that's no different from asking for death. How did you find me? I thought my tracks were hidden enough. I placed some small magical beasts in the water and in the sky. They don't have much combat power, but they're very good at warning and hiding. Really? How come I didn't notice them at all? Chen Zhao was surprised. The magical beasts Farmalati mentioned were too hidden. He actually didn't notice them at all. It was fine if he didn't know before. Now he knew, but he still couldn't sense them. They can't be microbes, right? They're not microbes, but they're much smaller than what the naked eye can see. Chen Zhao was speechless. Farmalati was completely different from the summoning spiritualist Chen Zhao thought. After all, Chen Zhao didn't think microbes were part of the summoning list. Chapter 3171. If you spread these microorganisms out, it should be easy to find our target, right? It's not as simple as you make it out to be. It's already very difficult for me to spread them around our ship. Beyond 300 meters, these microorganisms will go out of control. They will either be blown away by the sea breeze, or be poisoned to death in the sea. Chen Zhao pursed his lips. It seemed that he'd overestimated Farmalati's spell. The waves on the sea didn't stop. They seemed to be getting more and more violent in the past 2 days. Meanwhile, the ship searched aimlessly on the sea. Chen Zhao estimated that Becky Lu Lisha would return in disappointment soon. In the past few days, Xian Zheng had been hiding in the cabin and wouldn't come out. Chen Zhao didn't know if he was scheming to take revenge on Chen Zhao, or if he was really too ashamed to face anyone. According to the Weather Center, the entire Pacific Ocean seemed to be in chaos these days. No, it started from the man-made storm that Chen Zhao had created. Chen Zhao's actions seemed to have broken some sort of balance in the Pacific Ocean. It could also be a trigger. Now that the spiritual tide was here, everything from living things to the natural environment was changing. Therefore, any changes were normal. That direction, there's an extremely huge magical beast there, Farmalati said, pointing southeast. Are you sure? Becky Lu Lisha looked at Farmalati suspiciously. You've pointed wrong a few times in the past few days. Ms. Becky, we don't know the exact size or appearance of the magical beast you're looking for. The only thing we know is that it's very big, Farmalati said calmly. Farmalati said calmly, that's why I can only look for it based on this characteristic. No one knows how many giant magical beasts are hiding under the sea. Becky Lu Lisha also knew that Farmalati was telling the truth. She could only suppress her impatience. Sorry, I misspoke. Becky Lu Lisha also knew that there was no good solution now. Even if the big guy she was looking for was unbelievably huge, Compared to the entire ocean, it was still insignificant. They were no different from finding a needle in a haystack. Moreover, they didn't have any coordinates. It was easy to imagine the efficiency of searching aimlessly like this. In the past few days, Familati had used her secret technique to find a few giant water-type magical beasts. But none of them were what they were looking for. To be honest, if he hadn't come out this time, Chen Zhao didn't know that there were so many terrifying things hidden under the surface of the Pacific Ocean. Even Chen Zhao couldn't guarantee that Amon was the biggest creature in the world. Perhaps there are even larger creatures lurking beneath the surface. Just then, a crew member ran over. Other than the spiritualists, some of the crew members were ordinary people. They were all Becky Lalice's men. Many of them were experts with combat strength. Although they couldn't be compared to spiritualists, they could be considered super warriors among ordinary people. "Boss, I'm afraid we can't go that way." "Why not?" Becky Lulisha asked with a frown. "A hot cyclone is forming 400 kilometers away in that direction. It is estimated that it will grow into a superstorm in the next 3 hours. The wind is estimated to exceed 300 kilometers per hour. Even if our ship gets close, it will be very dangerous. Ignore the storm, keep going." Becky Lulisha waved her hand. Chen Zhao was not far away. He really didn't know what Becky Lulisha was thinking. He was clearly a weakling, yet he still dared to risk his life and charge into the storm. On the ship, even a few powerful spiritualists didn't dare to be so reckless. If the ship really capsized, the first to die would definitely be Becky Lulisha. Of course, there were still many real men on the ship. They didn't care about the superstorm at all. After the ship traveled 200 kilometers, the sky was already dark. In the distance, a huge black pillar pierced through the sky. Even a spiritualist would gasp in amazement at such a scene. Wave after wave crashed against the ocean-going ship. The closer they got, the more the ship shook. At the moment, the ship was no different from a small boat. Apart from the general direction, the people on the ship couldn't resist this kind of natural disaster. Chen Zhao didn't mind it getting bigger. He even added something to the waves. After the storm, Becky Lulisha would probably feel despair and return home. "This doesn't make sense. Why is there such a huge wave?" the crew members exclaimed. They were facing a wave that was more than 30 meters tall. The overwhelming pressure made everyone feel like they were suffocating. The huge wave crashed over, and the bow of the ship sank into the sea. It took a few seconds before it looked up again. "Damn it. Get ready, another wave is coming." There seemed to be something in the wave. Through the light emitted by the ocean-going ship, there was a huge thing hidden in the huge waves, faintly discernible. His eyes widened. He realized that there really was a magical beast in the wave. It was also shockingly huge. It wasn't any smaller than Amon. The beast's aura was so powerful that it made people's scalps go numb. It was even more powerful than Amon. It was a king of magical beasts. No, even among the few that Chen Zhao knew, only the Dragon Emperor could reach this level. Becky Lulisha held onto the railing tightly against the strong wind and rain. Right now Becky Lulisha was very excited. She yelled, "Found it, found it! Leviathan! I finally found it! Leviathan! Demon King of Hell? King of Jealousy." No, wasn't she looking for Amon? Plus, this wasn't a demon's aura. Plus, if this big guy was really the King of Jealousy, it could send everyone on the ship to heaven in minutes. Both the crew and the spiritualists on the ship felt their scalps go numb. The monster hiding in the wave had an aura that surpassed all the magical beasts they'd encountered before. Boom! The huge beast charged out of the wave, and the wave collapsed. The huge beast's body flew across the sky above the ship. Everyone's mouths were wide open in disbelief. Apart from the excited Becky Lulisha, everyone else felt their scalps go numb. It was unimaginably huge. Chen Zhao also felt suffocated. Of all the non-human beasts that Chen Zhao had fought before, only the King of Winged Serpents was bigger and stronger. The King of Winged Serpents was probably the King of Winged Serpents. However, the King of Winged Serpents was strengthened by the power of the world. However, the giant beast in front of him had completely relied on its own strength. This giant beast called Leviathan by Becky Lulisha was a super whale. Its huge mouth seemed to be able to swallow the world. Chen Zhao thought of a name, Kuanpeng. Clearly she had something that she hadn't told everyone. Moreover, her objective this time was not to capture the giant Pacific beast. Ms. Becky, can you explain the current situation? Familati looked at Becky Lou Lisha in dissatisfaction. Becky Lou Lisha glanced at Familati, showing some dissatisfaction on her face. As far as she was concerned, Familati and the others had been hired by her. In that case, he should listen to her completely instead of questioning her at this time. I don't need to explain to you, Becky Lou Lisha said arrogantly. You just need to follow my orders. Ms. Becky, you have to understand that the mission you told us beforehand is different from the actual mission. We have the right to refuse any of your orders. Why do you think I paid you so much? Becky Lou Lisha said coldly. It includes any problems you have to face, including deceiving you. You should be glad that you met such a generous employer like me. That's why you can get such a generous reward. Everyone felt uncomfortable with Becky Lou Lisha's words. But how many people could resist the charm of money? So what are we here for? To eliminate all enemies that try to stop me, Becky Lou Lisha said matter-of-factly. She didn't just mean external enemies, but internal enemies as well. Why do you have to lie to us? Can't you just tell us? No. Becky Lou Lisha replied firmly. So your so-called plan to catch the Pacific giant beast was a lie? Hee. If you can really capture the giant Pacific beast, let alone 2 billion, I'm willing to pay even 20 billion. Familati and the others were speechless. Indeed, that thing was so huge that it made people's hair stand on end. Even if they racked their brains, they couldn't figure out how to capture that thing. Where exactly is this place? You don't need to know where this is, Becky Lou Lisha said calmly. You just need to remember your job. Becky Lou Lisha's attitude made everyone very unhappy. But even though they were unhappy, no one jumped out to oppose her. There's an island. There's an island in front. A crew member exclaimed. Everyone looked forward. Indeed, in the wind and rain, they could vaguely see a huge shadow. Everyone looked at Becky Lou Lisha, hoping to get some information from her. Unfortunately, Becky Lou Lisha didn't plan to share any information at all. She only looked forward with bright eyes. Go to that island. But at this moment, the ocean-going ship suddenly shook. Everyone's expression didn't look too good, because it felt like the bottom of the ship had hit something. Boss, we hit a reef. There's a hole in the bottom of the ship. This was clearly bad news that couldn't get any worse. Put down the life raft. We'll go there on the life raft. Chen Zhao, who'd been watching from the side, frowned. He could feel that there were many creatures of various sizes, hiding in the surrounding sunken ships. They were probably the culprits behind most of the sunken ships. Their ocean-going ship was big enough now. It could at least defend against most creatures. At least, those things would take a long time to sink the ship. But if everyone sat on the life raft, the priority would be reversed. In that case, the roles would be reversed, and it would be easy for those creatures to overturn the life raft. When everyone fell into the water, their advantage would be completely gone. But Becky Lou Lisha definitely wouldn't listen. Becky Lou Lisha was a very forceful person. Plus, Chen Zhao didn't plan on persuading her either. He was also very curious about the island ahead. If he wanted to know the answer, the island in that direction was the only answer. Chapter 3173. Just then, the petrel circled back to the front of the boat. Everyone watched in bewilderment, only to see Hai Yan's body turn and transform into a spirit body. It wasn't strange if it was a transformed spirit. Spirit bodies were incorporeal, and shape-shifting magic was not a profound spell for them. However, the spirit body that this petrel transformed into was actually 80% similar to Becky Lou Lisha. Everyone couldn't help but look at Becky Lou Lisha, and then at the spirit. They kept comparing the two. Everyone was dazed. So Becky Lou Lisha wasn't a normal person. Or rather, she wasn't a real normal person. Then what's going on? Gaia asked in a low voice. Twin spirits, Chen Zhao said. What's that? Never heard of it. One soul and one body. That's what most people know, Chen Zhao said. But there's still a small chance that one body will give birth to two souls. The two come from the same source, but there's still a difference. For example, Becky Lou Lisha. She's just a normal person. As for the other soul, it's obvious that she's trained in magic. Chen Zhao could also feel that the spirit that looked similar to Becky Lou Lisha wasn't weak. Twin spirits were rare, but they weren't the only ones in the spiritual world. Everyone with some knowledge naturally guessed the relationship between Becky Lou Lisha and the spirit body. Becky Lou Lisha didn't plan on introducing her sister either. She urged the crew to prepare the kayaks quickly. There were plenty of kayaks on the boat. Everyone was arranged to form groups of 3. They headed toward the stormy island. As for the wind and waves on the sea, although the wind was strong and the waves were strong, most of the people were cultivators and had the ability to protect themselves. Only a few crew members were left on the boat. None of the spiritualists were left. They all followed Becky Lou Lisha to the island. Chen Zhao, Familati, and Becky Lou Lisha boarded a kayak. To be honest, the kayaks couldn't give people a sense of security in the stormy seas. Becky Lou Lisha was the most uncomfortable. At least Chen Zhao and Familati had enough power. But Becky Lou Lisha only had one twin spirit. If the twin spirits possessed Becky Lou Lisha, they would be able to unleash their full power. But now, the twins had turned into petrol and were standing on Becky Lou Lisha's shoulder. Right now, Becky Lou Lisha was just a normal person. She chose to share a kayak with Chen Zhao and Familati because Familati was the captain and her magical beast had great protection abilities. As for Chen Zhao, it was because her twin spirits couldn't see through him. Based on her understanding, those that she couldn't see through were basically all very powerful. At least her guess that Chen Zhao was powerful was correct. Something's coming. Everyone be on guard. Familati's strength might not be considered outstanding in the team. However, her senses were probably second to Chen Zhao's. Therefore, as soon as there was movement in the water, she immediately noticed it. Becky Larissa, Chen Zhao, and Familati's kayaks were in the middle of the other kayaks. Therefore, the surrounding kayaks were the first to be attacked by the underwater creatures. The first to attack was a group of sea wolves. Sea wolves were a group of sea wolves with wolf heads and fish bodies. They were more than a meter tall. They also moved in groups like wolves in the forest or grasslands. Individually, they weren't strong, but team battles were never measured by individual strength. Coupled with their ferocious nature, most land creatures would become their food when they entered the water. They also had powerful reproductive abilities. A sea wolf could lay tens of thousands of eggs, and the survival rate of the larvae was much higher than regular fish. Logically speaking, these characteristics could allow them to dominate the oceans of the world. However, they had a characteristic that prevented them from reproducing en masse. This was because they didn't like regular sea creatures. They only ate creatures with magic power, and only attacked creatures with magic power. There were many magical beasts in the sea, but most of them were very powerful. Sea wolves couldn't afford to offend them at all. Among some sea magical beasts, they were just a dish on someone else's menu, but now they were just the appetizer of the team. Their ferocious side didn't help them in the hands of the spiritualists in the team. Almost everyone had their own abilities. The weaker ones were more than enough to protect themselves. The stronger ones, or those with specialized restraining methods, could easily kill hundreds of sea wolves. At first, Familati was very vigilant. After all, her current duty was to protect Becky Lou Lisha. But after a while, she realized that her focus was a complete waste of time, because there were no sea wolves approaching their kayak at all. But it wasn't because the people on the raft were watertight. After all, they could defend in the sea, but not in the water. The real reason why they were unscathed was that there were no sea wolves approaching them at all. There seemed to be an invisible barrier around them, and none of the sea wolves were able to enter this barrier. Familati looked at Chen Zhao. "Mr. Chen, how did you make those sea wolves escape from our raft?" "Just a small trick." Chen Zhao didn't deny what he'd done. Familati smiled. She did not think that this kind of ability would be so simple. Whether it was deterrence or magic, it was impressive enough to make the enemy unable to resist. "Mr. Chen, you should be the strongest in the team," Becky Lou Lisha said. Ms. Becky, you overestimate me. My twin wouldn't lie to me, Becky Lou Leisha said with certainty. Neither you nor your twin know much about the spiritual world, Chen Zhao said with a shrug. Chen Zhao shrugged. She probably can't even tell how strong I am. Fight, on the other hand, thinks that I'm the strongest because he can't. What's wrong with that? I can't tell because I'm good at disguising myself. It doesn't mean that I'm the strongest. You can easily defeat Xianzheng, but the others can't. Isn't that enough to prove your strength? I was able to defeat Xianzheng easily, because our natures are similar. We are both enhancers. This leads to our battle style being very simple. Whoever is stronger, and has better resistance, will have the absolute chance of winning. Although you said that, I believe that your strength is still the strongest. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.